Greetings, dear listeners, and welcome to Sci-Frights, the film discussion podcast at the interzone where horror meets science fiction. My name is Liam Dunn, and I am a screenwriter, film critic, and lifelong science fiction fan.
My name is Dr. Lindsay Hallam. I'm the course leader of the Film and Screen Studies degree at the University of the Arts London, who specialises in horror cinema.
And we are in fact partners in life and in crime and die-hard film fanatics.
So we are finishing up today our current season on AI and technofear, going down the rabbit hole into the deepest reaches of cyberspace, across realms of reality and into the depths of depravity. So Liam, what films are we discussing?
We are looking at Lily and Lana Wachowski's era-defining sci-fi masterpiece, The Matrix, and a recent film that only came out, I think, last year that really blew us away, which is Pascal Plante's dark psychological thriller, Red Rooms.
So just a reminder to everyone in podcast land, we are going to spoil the hell out of these films. So if you want to watch these films first, please go ahead and we will be here when you get back.
Have you ever had a dream, Neo, that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world?
What is happening to me?
The answer is out there, Neo. It's the question that drives us.
What is the Matrix?
The Matrix is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
They're watching you, Neo.
Human beings are a disease. You are a cancer of this planet. And we are the cure.
Get me the hell out of here!
Welcome to the real world.
So you're here to save the world.
So what do you need? Guns. Lots of guns.
No one has ever done anything like this.
That's why it's going to work.
Buckle your seatbelt, Dorothy. Because Kansas is going bye-bye.
Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
So, in case anybody doesn't know anything about The Matrix, the film follows Thomas Anderson, played by Keanu Reeves, who feels lost in the world. A put-upon software developer by day and a hacker going by the name of Neo by night, selling malware on discs out of his apartment. Anderson is seeking answers to a feeling in his mind that his life isn't quite his own. He feels these answers lie with Morpheus, a mysterious figure wanted by the authorities. When he's targeted by a group of mysterious agents, led by the enigmatic Agent Smith, Hugo Weaving, he crosses paths with Morpheus, played by Lawrence Fishburne, and his second-in-command, another notorious hacker named Trinity, played by Carrie-Anne Moss. But when Morpheus offers him the truth about his own life and reality itself, Neo learns that the entire world is a simulation called the Matrix, created by a malevolent AI to keep humanity docile while they are processed as fuel for the machines, which have taken over the world after a devastating conflict between them and their human creators. But what Morpheus believes and Neo has to confront is that he is some prophesied messianic figure, something called the One, who is destined to put an end to the Matrix and destroy the machines for good and bring humanity back from the brink. So Morpheus teaches Neo how to manipulate the Matrix, use the software against itself to learn how to fight and survive within this simulated world, to try and bring it down from within, hoping this knowledge will help Neo realize his true potential and finally become the hero he was always meant to be. Eventually, Neo comes into direct conflict with Agent Smith and in a final battle reaches his apotheosis and turns the tables on the machines, bending the Matrix to his will and becoming the ultimate weapon, becoming the One.
All right.
Exciting.
So, I mean, we were both at the exact correct age for this film when it comes out. It comes out in 1999. So let's just talk about when we first saw it, how it blew our tiny little minds, and our history with it. So start with you.
Well, I mean, in general, like the film kind of came as this cultural shockwave.
It was so huge.
It was redefining the blockbuster and what science fiction could be, and what will block and like big cinema events. And I remember going to see. I did see it in the cinema. I don't know if I went with my brothers or with some friends or it was a mix. But I remember seeing the trailers, and there was that the big ending shot of the trailer is that bullet time, whoa, like thing that Keanu Reeves does, and you're just like, what the fuck is this? Where has this come from? This is like nothing we've ever seen before. And then we go and see the film, and it doesn't feel. I don't think the trailer tells you what the Matrix is. It just shows you all this mind-bending action. And you're just like, oh, how are they even doing this? And then when you learn that it's this, the war between the machines and the Matrix, the world that we live in is actually this simulation, it felt like dangerous and philosophical, and like kind of unsettling more than escapist. Because it kind of had this, it made the spectacle not empty. It made it feel real and feel like they had this substance to it, and it felt important and you cared about the characters. And I think it was just no other film that year would me and my friends and my brothers talk about other than that. It was just and like the soundtrack kicked ass. Like I was really into like alternative rock and metal and stuff at the time. So like a soundtrack with like Rob Zombie and Rage Against the Machine. And I mean, Massive Attack is used in the film, but it's not on the soundtrack. But, it was just like everything that I loved was all in this one film. And even going a bit further from that, like when it came out on video, on VHS, when it became a weekly, so for those who don't know what video stores are, you could get a new release video and like 5, so that's an overnight, and 5 weeklies or 7 weeklies or whatever for like, a certain amount of money, 10 Australian dollars or whatever. And when it became a weekly release, so that's like maybe 6 months to a year after it had come out, I remember renting it. And so you've got 7 days to watch it. I watched it once a day for 7 days. Like that's how obsessed I was with this film at the time. Lindsay.
Yeah. I remember all the ad campaign, the trailers, and everyone was just so blown away by the look of the film and by this idea of bullet time and also the fight choreography, the martial arts. So I went and saw it with my older brother, Stuart, and he is a big Kung Fu fan. So I grew up watching all these Kung Fu films. So definitely the martial arts aspect was of interest to both of us. But I think you hit the nail on the head, and that it was this action spectacle, but it was so much more than that. That when you're in your, I guess, late teens, you want something deeper. And so this whole idea that there was almost a philosophy behind the Matrix, behind what it was trying to say, that it does feel like this deeper thing that you really can delve into. So that was really important. And as you said, the soundtrack, they just look so fucking cool.
Yeah, the fashion is so cool. Because it's everyone's their best selves in the Matrix once they're unplugged, right? So they all just like, why wouldn't you just look as cool as hell?
Yeah.
Just cause.
Yeah, so like there was the look of the film and the blending of all the different genres, the martial arts and the science fiction, and there's a bit of film noirish look to the film, especially when it's in the Matrix simulation. So it was appealing to all, if you're a sci-fi fan or if you're a martial arts fan. So covering a lot of bases there, but also it felt like almost our new, like something like Star Wars was probably for people sure. Like maybe a generation before. Absolutely. Like it felt that big, like this was our big new sci-fi mythology. Like it was this also this new mythology, this new tale that was, and it felt so much about the moment. It comes out in 1999, just before the millennium. And there was also that time, there was this anxiety about the future, about Y2K and whether the computers were all going to shut down when it turned year 2000. But also at that time, because I'm pretty sure like maybe a couple of years before the film comes out, I get my first like email account. We're starting to become increasingly kind of online, or as what they used to call it, cyberspace.
Yes.
I remember at university in like my second year because I was doing a course that was called Mass Communication, which is such a late 90s, early 2000s term that, people don't do courses in degrees in mass communication anymore. And part of it was film and television, but then a lot of it was like media studies. And I remember doing a unit called cyber media. And the whole like almost novelty about that unit was that we did it online through discussion forums and things. But I remember we were looking into, we did things like cyber war and cyber sex and all these, everything had cyber in kind of prefix. And so The Matrix was definitely capturing that time. So it was almost like this new mythology for this future technology, or this technology that was becoming more pervasive in our lives. So it just hits at just the right moment.
Absolutely.
And it's also interesting to think that in the, like leading up throughout the 90s, you had all these films that were starting to look at virtual reality and cyberspace, which we visited quite a few of the films. And so it's, Matrix kind of almost seems this culmination of this exploration that was happening throughout the 90s in film, especially in science fiction. What some of the titles that we watched or that come to mind, it's like The Lawnmower Man, Virtuosity, Johnny Mnemonic, which is another Keanu Reeves starring film, The 13th Floor, Hackers, Ghost in the Machine, Brain Scan, Strangeland, Existence, and Strange Days. Revisiting these films, was there anything that struck you about what these films at this time were doing?
Well, I mean, I think The Matrix is definitely the best of the lot.
Yes.
And I think it's funny that like Lawnmower Man and Virtuosity are actually both directed by the same guy. I think is it Brett Leonard? And Lawnmower Man, I remember we watched that recently for this episode and somehow accidentally watched the 2.5-hour director's cut, which is a real slog. Because
I don't think I remember seeing bits of the film over the years, and probably it was on TV. So but as I was watching, I was like, I don't think I've ever actually sat down and watched this whole entire film. And then as we were going along, you were like, I don't remember this. And then we realized we were watching the 2.5-hour director's cut.
I know. But as a kid, I remember watching it quite a bit and thinking it was really great. Like that film felt dangerous at the time when I was a lot younger. But all the kind of the 3D modeling kind of quote unquote VR stuff is very dated now, obviously, but it was cutting edge at the time.
I was reading and it took months and months and it cost so much, and it kind of looks retro now. Because I think I remember showing a clip, just a bit of it to students like last year, and they were like, that kind of looks cool. But it was so like in a retro, very 90s way. But I remember when The Lawnmower Man comes out, everyone was like, oh my God, this computer generated imagery. The film is not great.
No.
But what I really quite liked about watching The Lawnmower Man now, because in the film, Jeff Fay plays this handyman gardener, but he's a bit simple.
Yeah, intellectually handicapped.
Yeah, and he somehow gets plugged into this program and he starts learning at a really rapid rate. And so he's just consuming all this information and growing stronger and more powerful from that, and it goes into a bad place. But what struck me about the film watching it is that The Lawnmower Man and what he was going through, it reminds me a lot of what we call generative AI or large language models, how they just absorb all this information and then they're like, oh yeah, here's all of the history of philosophy. Okay, yeah, what have you got next? And there was even a scene where Pierce Brosnan, who's the scientist who comes up with this technology, is saying to the Lawnmower Man, I can't remember his actual name in the film, but yeah, you're learning like all about, say, art or whatever, but don't you actually, what do you feel or what is it making you feel? Is this whole thing of like, he was just taking all this information and data in and not actually, I guess, understanding it or actually engaging with it and feeling anything from it. And so it just reminds me that what The Lawnmower Man was doing is basically what generative AI is doing. Yeah. It's just going through all this information and not actually having any feeling about it. It's just like, oh yeah, here's all the history, or here's all art. I'm going to learn all about Renaissance art. Great. Okay, what's next? It almost doesn't feel anything, or it was just an interesting parallel that I was noticing in that film, because we watched some shockers. We watched that film, was it Strange Lines?
Yeah,
that was directed by Dee Snider.
Yeah, that was not good.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, I think Existenz is a good one. It's kind of David Cronenberg doing his version of The Matrix. That's a lot of fun. And Strange Days, of course, is really, really interesting. Catherine Bigelow, written by James Cameron.
And I'm hoping we'll end up talking about that in our Director's Double Bills. I want to do a Catherine Bigelow episode.
And I really loved Johnny Mnemonic at the time, and watching that again, that was a nice nostalgic trip back. That's an interesting film with great visuals and great kind of cyberpunk ideas. And of course, you got Keanu Reeves at the centre of that as well. And I think... Was that just before The Matrix or just after?
Before.
Yeah, just before. But when you've got all this sort of stuff, because it's... I mean, we're going to go to cyberpunk in a bit, but that's kind of an 80s thing, which then leads into... But then in the 90s, you've got all these kind of cyberspace movies. And I mean, even Hackers is kind of fun with like trying to get into the subculture at the time. But I think where The Matrix succeeds is... the fact that they're not using all of this sort of CG. They're using all of CGI, but it's not like the Lawnmower Man. By saying the real world is the simulation, you can kind of cut back on a lot of having to do a lot of that stuff. But it does feel like the directors know they're steeped in that culture. It's not somebody coming in going, well, this is what hackers do and this is what this does. Like it has that great 90s kind of aesthetic. Like the film opens with green on black DOS visuals. Like I remember on computers in the 90s before Windows, it was DOS and it would be a black screen with green text and you'd be writing commands in to get the computer to do things before you even had Windows. And, you know, in Neo's apartment, there's stacks of CDs and he's got like a book with all the discs inside that he sells all his illicit stuff on there. And it brought to mind, and there's like the fetishization of mobile phones. Like mobile phones were just kind of coming in, and these were like the cool like snap open things.
Flip phones.
Yeah, but they were they kind of slid open instead, and they looked really futuristic, even though it was before smartphones. And it reminded me of this thing that I'm hearing about of a kind of subgenre almost, or sub-style of films called Nokia Wave, which is in the 90s, which it was a lot about sort of espionage, paranoia, city grids, network infrastructures and technology. So it was a lot of kind of post-Cold War action and spy films are considered Nokia Wave, like GoldenEye and things like that. And Spy Game even, which is like early 2000s, like this sort of post-Cold War technological frontier. But I think that Matrix has a bit of that in there, even though primarily it's more kind of a cyberpunk action movie. There's that element of like, you know, this is the future, but it's kind of flip phones and almost dial-up internet and this sort of stuff. I think another Keanu Reeves film that could fit into that might maybe be Chain Reaction as well, which is like, anyway. So I think the Wachowskis are actually, I think they're steeped in all of that stuff. They're not kind of trying to apply it as the kids think this is popular. They're like, no, this is our world. And it's why I think it's such a much stronger film than any of the others.
And so you mentioned there's cyberpunk. So The Matrix is often talked about as an example of cyberpunk, which, as you mentioned, really comes from the 1980s. A lot of it has to do with trends in science fiction literature in particular, most notably William Gibson's Neuromancer, but also just thinking about Blade Runner, which I just talked about recently. That's also seen as a key example of cyberpunk. And a lot of what cyberpunk was doing was, in many ways, it's just an extension of just dystopian fiction. But it is it has this focus on the technological, but it's not this far-flung future where things are, people are flying around in spaceships or whatever. It mixes, I think, the science fiction, I think, with a lot of elements from film noir, that it is very urban. And there's also this aesthetic to do with kind of very much the kind of street level crime and grime.
A term I found online when looking at some of this stuff up is high-tech, low-life.
A lot of it is kind of about these conflicts that happen between people and the technology. And something that really is an aspect, I think, of Blade Runner is how this increasingly technological society has kind of drained us, not just of human connection, of human empathy. And I think that's definitely something that all of the Wachowskis works is they're all about connection between people, even to the point with their series Sense8. There's something, it's a running theme I see in their work, is this connection that happens between people. And so you have these dystopian futures are these really tough places, and that people are kind of almost dehumanized through all this technology.
There is that heavy noir influence, but also cyberpunk kind of came into its own in the 80s. So there's also this 80s effect to it of like the future is now sort of element to it. And you've got there's usually some kind of, mega corporation, or there's like a corporate, like corporations run everything. So this is kind of very Reagan America. And so it's this dystopia of mega corporations, of tech creep, where everyone's got a port in their skull or a cyber limb. There are androids and cyborgs. And again, like I said, it's all street level. So like, and technology isn't background dressing. It's like it drives the narrative. It's part of everyday life. There's a philosophy behind it. A lot of it looks into like, it's all what does it mean to be human comes up a lot in all of these things of how far do we go where we're not ourselves anymore. And the Matrix looks at things like, death in the simulation is death in reality. Like even though we know we're in a simulation, if we still get hurt, our bodies still believe it. So we're still kind of connected to that even when we realize that it's not real. And that kind of, that's a Philip K. Dick sort of thing, which is what influenced Blade Runner. And in the 80s, there was a tabletop RPG game called Cyberpunk 2020, I think it was called, which then became most recently a video game called Cyberpunk 2077, which has Keanu Reeves in it in a starring role. So I think there's a big through line that you can go from the sort of Cyberpunk's sort of heyday in the 80s through to these kind of cyberspace movies to the Matrix and beyond. And Keanu Reeves kind of figures quite heavily in a lot of that stuff. So like the video game especially is heavily influenced by Johnny Mnemonic. You play a criminal who gets information put into their brain, which starts to corrupt their brain, just like in Johnny Mnemonic. So there's a lot of that stuff going on. And I think the Matrix is a big cornerstone of all of that.
But I think also the good point that you mentioned there, that it is all about these kind of the corporations and coming out of like the Reagan era. And then it's also very relevant to today that it is all about, we've kind of been taken over by these corporations. And there is definitely that huge divide between the haves and the have-nots. Like with Blade Runner, all the people of any means have gone off-world. Yeah. Like the only people that are left on planet Earth are the people who can't afford to leave. Yeah. And I think that there's definitely think about like we've already talked about RoboCop I think also definitely can kind of is playing with in this kind of realm of cyberpunk, because you do have this really like crime ridden city and they're trying to create this new city, but it's all being controlled by this corporation that are also going to essentially install all the crime into the city as well. Yeah. So they're going to control the crime and control all the legitimate business.
Yeah. And I think in the Matrix though, it's like the megacorp is replaced really by the AI, the machine overlords. But I think it speaks to the same sort of thing of like we need to be. And this is, what we're seeing now with the generative AI and all the talk around that now is we've got to be careful who we relinquish power to. So the idea of that in the Matrix is that we started to develop AI and started using them basically as slave labor and relinquishing all these tasks over to them until eventually they rise up and kill us or use us as fuel or what have you. And, the whole thing with mega corporations that we with RoboCop as the example, like the government can't afford to run the city anymore. So piecemeal, it gets given over to corporations to run it as a business. And then everything's ruined from that point because it's completely, there's no oversight. There's no any of this. So I think there's a similar kind of conversation happening there.
We're relinquishing our power just for convenience.
Yeah.
And just for things at speed.
To make it easier. And
that's the whole thing is like we're seeing at the moment that we give over all our details, our privacy, but also we're like, why bother learning anything? We're going to be like the lawnmower man. We're just going to, we're just all consuming the information or we're just basically, we're not learning anything. All we're learning is what prompts to put into.
I mean, there's that great episode of the 60s TV series The Prisoner called The General, where they invent this computer that can teach you history in, like, give you a 3-year history course in 30 seconds or something, and it just beams it straight into your mind. And then Patrick McGowan's wandering around and everyone's like, when was the Battle of Hastings? Oh, it was in 1066 or whatever, and they're just rattling off dates of when things happened, but they don't know any more details than that. So when he's confronted by the computer at the end, they're like, ask it any question and it will give you any answer. And he just asks it why, WHY question mark. And he puts the paper into the machine because, it's the 60s. So they have to put the punch card in, and the computer has a meltdown and destroys itself because it doesn't know the answer to why things happen. It only knows the what, when, and who, but not the why. And I thought that was even in the 60s they were discussing that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And it all goes back to, the question of also what it means to be human. I think also like key example of, I guess, cyberpunk would be Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah. A huge influence on the Matrix.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the whole thing is like, in Ghost in the Shell, you've got the main character who has piece by piece being replaced, like their body's been replaced, but then it's this whole thing of like, do they still have a soul? Do they still have, are they still that person that they originally were if they're being kind of piecemeal replaced by technology? So that has that deeper kind of meaning and philosophy behind it that I think definitely it must have been a kind of touchstone for the Wachowskis when they were making it. Yeah. So when we move on to The Matrix, we have at the center of it Neo, and it does fit into the very typical hero's journey. And I mentioned before how it did feel like it was our generation's Star Wars, this new mythology. And so you do have the hero who starts off, there's a reluctance to go on that journey. They have the kind of guardian or older mentor figure, which you have with Morpheus. And it's just definitely following the very kind of clear trajectory that you see in a lot of different stories over the years. And so it does end up being all about this chosen one. But it's also interesting that the Neo himself, he's even told, like when Agent Smith first meets him, he basically says you're living a double life, that he has this day-to-day life where he works in an office. Yeah, he's Thomas Anderson. Agent Smith says, you pay your taxes. And then your other life is lived in computers. So he has this his real self, quote unquote, and his online self. So it's also kind of starting to engage with this whole idea that when we're online, we have almost this other life, or that we could be this different person online. And, when you see him at work, he is almost like the man in the grey flannel suit. Everything in the office is very grey. He works in cubicles.
He's obviously got there's something within himself, and there's that other part of him that's within himself of trying to, he's already seeking out Morpheus. Like he knows of this guy, and he thinks that he's going to hold the answers to the questions that he has about life, that he already has this sinking suspicion that things aren't quite right, but he just kind of can't. In that scene when he gets arrested by the agents, like you can see he still can't quite let go of the world that he's in, because he has to go out onto the ledge to escape, and he just can't do it. And that's obviously a great writing trick of like, well, later on he's going to have to take the leap, right? It's all about the leap of faith. We'll probably talk about it a bit later, but there is a lot of thematic stuff in talking about the double life stuff. There's a lot of thematic things of these binaries. And, when with computers, they work in binary code, ones and zeros, and there's all these choices that everybody has to make. They talk about choice a lot in the film, and there's, do you go this way? Do you go that way? You've got two, is that
red pill or blue pill?
Red pill or blue pill. Are you the one? Are you not the one? So there's lots of choices given to Neo. And so I think there's a lot of focus on that, of these kind of like, this way or that way, or, what defines you, what makes you the person you are. Is it the choices you make, or is it destiny? Is there such thing as fate? And I think with his position as the one, as this kind of savior figure, is, I think, on the face of it, it's kind of screenwriting 101. It's, the Joseph Campbell stuff, which is all great and fine. But I think the Wachowskis kind of undercut that a little bit, especially in the sequels, which we can talk about a little bit later. But I think he becomes exceptional by understanding the world that he lives in, which I think, is a good lesson for everybody. But I think there's more to it than just he's the one. But he has to go see the Oracle and all these sorts of things, and he has to understand. Again, it's like the choices. He has to choose to be the one. He can't just be the one. But the film kind of suggests that he's going to be making these choices along the way in order to finally do that. And it's more about him understanding how to break or bend the rules of the Matrix. And I think it's not as clear cut as it might seem at first glance. In fact, the Matrix itself.
Yeah, and as you were talking, it makes me think, like, I mean, in terms of the theory behind or philosophy behind a lot of it, which I will get into. And Gilles Deleuze, he talks a lot about being and becoming, and this whole idea like being is this very kind of solid state and so this whole thing of like him being the one or becoming the one. And so this whole thing of like being is this very kind of solid state that you are this, whereas becoming is this process that's always changing and progressing, and that you're in this process of becoming, which is almost that you're never going to be just one thing. And so I think that definitely a lot of what the Wachowskis' kind of underlying philosophy or theory that they're exploring, this whole idea of the one, and you talk about this idea of binaries, again, which is this, it's either this or this. If it's not this, then it must be this.
Yeah.
And a lot of like kind of post-structuralist thinking is that this whole idea of breaking down the binaries, that things don't fit into binary categories.
Yeah.
And so I think that a lot of, and you can also, and we'll talk a bit about the Wachowskis, who are both trans women, and how they've started to talk more recently about a lot of the origins of the story being before they transitioned, that the story was kind of showing them what they were really feeling or who they really were before maybe they even knew it or had started that journey. So I think the film is definitely, it sets up these binary oppositions and this whole thing of like you either are the one or you're not the one. But it's this whole thing of maybe it's this process of becoming, it's this process of also connection. I also think that, and I want to get into it later, that I think Trinity is really important, and maybe she's even more powerful than Neo. There's always this motif. I think it even starts the very beginning of the film. Oh, no, not the very beginning, because the first scene we have is of Trinity.
Yeah.
But then I think the first time we ever see Neo is him waking up. And the last time we were watching it, there are multiple times in the film where Neo wakes up.
Yeah.
And so it's this constant thing of waking up, of opening your eyes, of actually seeing things beyond what they appear to be.
And the closing credits song is called Wake Up by Rage Against the Machine. I think Neo goes through a series of awakenings, and like the red pill, blue pill thing is almost like, I mean, you're talking about the Wachowskis like realizing that writing the film was them going through some of these things. It is like, it offers this, it's almost an existential thing. It's like comfort versus truth. Like, do you just keep, do you ignore what's nagging at you about yourself and just continue on with your life and don't pay attention to it?
Or ask the questions.
Or do you ask the questions and you just, at the risk of tearing your life apart, taking the red pill is like a political and a spiritual awakening, because it's like you find out who you really are, but then you don't just become the one just because you make that one choice. You then have to go through a series of choices and a series of awakenings in order to eventually find your true purpose. And what the film does well, I think, is that with the whole Oracle stuff is that everyone goes to see the Oracle, but no one is allowed to tell each other what the Oracle told them. And the whole thing is that she tells him, he's like, I'm not the one. She's like, sorry, kiddo. And it's like, she tells you what you need to hear at that moment in order to get you through the next bit. But it's like, he has to get to that point where he's ignoring everything that Morpheus says, to just be like, I'm not what you say I am, I can't be that special. But then that's what sets him up for later when Morpheus gets kidnapped. That's his defining choice where he's like, I have to go. He rescued me. I have to rescue him. That's just the way it goes. And that's his moment of breakthrough, really, is when he realizes that he can actually do these things. But then also Trinity is told that she would meet the one and fall in love with him. So she's like, I fell in love with you, so you must be the one. So there are these elements of kind of the mythic and the real stuff kind of all gets mixed in together. And I think that's what it complicates it beyond it just being this grand sort of messianic thing. And also in the sequels, they talk about how it's kind of like the one is even, he's not even the first one, that he's kind of this system generated necessity. So it makes him even less important in a way. So it's like, I think it all boils down to, it's like, well, you're the one to yourself in a way. Like you need to find your own path and your own self within this system, regardless of what people are telling you.
But then I also think it is breaking down the whole idea of the one.
Yeah.
That and like the fact that he's the one, but he's one of many ones.
Yeah.
That he's again this multiplicity and connectivity. I think is something that plays out, especially as you go on into the sequels. Another aspect that I think is really interesting in terms of the film, and you could say that it's this kind of postmodern text. It's all these references to other things, and what I find really interesting, and it's something that I got from an article by G. Christopher Williams called "Mastering the Real: Trinity as the Real Hero of the Matrix." But one of the things it kind of mentions is how Neo is likened throughout the film to other narratives that all have female protagonists, most obviously Alice in Wonderland. And, the title of our episode is Down the Rabbit Hole. And it's all this whole idea that he's going down the rabbit hole. But it's also like that he's not just going into, like, Wonderland isn't just, it's supposed to be this fantasy world, but actually he's going down the rabbit hole and seeing, I guess, reality. But also there's this really key moment that I think it's after he takes the red pill and he touches the mirror. Yeah. And
the looking glass.
Yes, through the looking glass. But what's interesting is that he touches the mirror and the mirror becomes him. So he doesn't go into the mirror becomes him, which is this really kind of interesting reflection. But also, I mean, towards the end, we are with Trinity. She awakens him, again, awakening, by kissing him. And it's this reverse of like Snow White or Sleeping Beauty. And he's the Snow White Sleeping Beauty character. Yeah. And Trinity is the Prince Charming. But also there's even one point with Sci-Fi where he says something about you're not in Kansas is going bye. And so it's this whole thing of, also Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. And at the very beginning of the film, he's told to follow the white rabbit. So it's definitely, there's these referencing of these other, kind of almost mythic narratives, but it's all the ones with female protagonists. And so Neo is fulfilling the role usually of that's taken by kind of female protagonists, the ones who are awakened to something. Yeah. So I find that a really kind of interesting aspect. And there is also, I think, another part of the film that he does seem to be almost become like a messiah figure. There's almost a risk, and I think the film avoids it in the most part, of this whole idea of Neo as the white messiah, because especially as you go on, you have Morpheus, this black character and Morpheus is always using this kind of rhetoric of like enslavement and like he's this father of a revolution, but yet it's all in service to this white man who is the one that they all must follow, even though Morpheus has more of the kind of information and really is more of the natural leader, but yet it's always in service. The same with the Oracle as well. And she's seen in this very kind of domestic setting. There was another article I was reading that kind of said I think it was Jason Hallam is saying that there's maybe some problematic parallels to the mammy stereotype with the Oracle of a black woman in domestic space who's kind of caring for white children and is the caretaker. And again, she's almost in service of these white characters. So I think there's this aspect of the film that I think that's the thing, is that when it is this whole idea of Neo is the one and this messiah figure, I think that's the kind of the least interesting aspect of the story, of him being the one, of being this Messiah figure. And I think actually once you go deeper into it, it is undercutting that whole idea of being the one.
I think so.
Yeah. So I think it manages to kind of swerve that in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I think the Wachowskis understand that that's a good driver for the narrative, and because it's something everybody understands, right? It's shorthand, and it's when you're throwing all these philosophical ideas and crazy visual effects and action scenes at people, it's kind of it's a center to hold on to that will pull you through the story. But then they I think they also do undercut that or come into sort of conversation with that idea, I think especially in the sequels. So I think they're not just resting on the laurels of having that story as a be all and end all.
Yeah. Which brings me to Trinity, where I mean it was in this article I was reading by G. Christopher Williams, this whole idea that Trinity is she the real hero of the film? It's also interesting that her name Trinity, it feels like it's a reference to the Holy Trinity, which is male, Father and the Son. So there's the flipping of genders there. But also, again, this whole idea of Trinity being multiple, one and multiple at the same time, I think is really important. And I think, the fact that the film begins with her.
Yeah.
It begins with her, and the first time we see that bullet time is with her, where she rises up and then the camera moves around her. So the first time we kind of get this different view of, reality is being manipulated, we're all in this simulation, begins with her. And then, of course, there's the bit where she first meets Neo in the club.
Yeah.
And there is the exchange where, because she's obviously a very well-known hacker. And so when Neo meets her, he says, I always thought you were a guy. And her reply is, most guys do. Yeah. So it's throughout the film, you are, again, it's following the hero's journey of him, starting to he masters the simulation. So the whole idea is that the real world, the supposed real world that we're living in, which in the film is 1999, that actually is revealed to be a simulation. And actually the reality is, what do they say? It's more like 2199 or something. Yeah. So you get throughout the film and you go the great sequences of Neo learning to master the matrix, learning to master the simulation. And so he's being guided by Morpheus through all these different programs where he's learning. I mean, the best, of course, being, when he's learning all the martial arts.
I know Kung Fu.
Yeah, and the whole thing of him and Morpheus sparring with each other, and you just have the great martial arts choreography, which is choreographed by what is that?
Is it Wen Wuoping?
Yes, Wen Wuoping.
Who became a superstar after this film?
Yes,
this and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon were coming out around the same time, or Tiger
2000,
came out the year after.
Yeah. And
then, of course, the Kill Bill movies and, wire work just exploded in cinema, didn't it?
Yeah, so you'd also have this aspect a lot of from Hong Kong cinema. So it's this blending of different genres, but also different cultures as well in the film. Which again is part of this whole kind of hybridity and not just being one thing, but being multiple things.
And a big thing of cyberpunk as well, of the sort of multicultural diaspora.
Yes, the blending of all different cultures kind of mishmashing together. But you have, so Neo, he masters the simulation. But what's great about Trinity is in that final scene, she controls the real. Like she actually brings back the dead. And it's because it's the whole idea that that Neo must be the one because she was told she would fall in love with the one. And so she ultimately is the one who not just controls the simulation, but controls reality as well and defies reality. Yeah. She brings back the dead. So it's interesting, this whole idea of Neo being the one, this Messiah figure. He's supposed to rise back from the dead himself, but actually she's the one that does it. So it's just interesting. I think that there is definitely all these subversions as well of archetypes.
Yeah, and I think that also brings in, there is still that element of the mythic about it, where it's like we're dealing in this science fiction world where it's all on rules and code, and if you know the rules, you know how to bend them or break them, and but it's all this very physical, tangible thing. But then there's this element of this faith and of love that can also pull us through this, but it's untangible. It's not something we can actually hold on to. It's this ethereal thing, so that's what makes us human at the end of the day. So that's what gives us our power. Our strength over the machines is our ability to love and to hope and to have faith and these sorts of things, which Trinity is able to harness in that moment. And so it's that intangible thing is that kind of outside the actual action of the film, which I think is, again, while they're trying to undercut some of the mythological messianic stuff, there is still that little bit that you can't quite explain. And that's what, where Trinity's at the heart of that.
But then it's still the fairy tale aspect. It's still the kiss brings the person back to life. But it's just that there's this interesting gender flip that's happening, and back then people didn't bitch about it when it happened. They were thrilled by it. Which also I think we need to talk about Morpheus as well. So we've got Neo and we've got Trinity. But yet Morpheus is the other kind of key figure. And I've mentioned before how he is serving as that kind of mental figure, older, died father figure. But of course, Morpheus is also from Greek mythology, the god of sleep and dreams. So he's the one who is waking up Neo. Anything else about Morpheus?
Well, he's the Obi-Wan, right? He's the mentor who, if we're talking like Joseph Campbell stuff, there's always that mentor who has to like set the hero on their path, give them the tools that they need in order to, once they accept the call to adventure, they then need to be given the tools in order to succeed. And so there's always that character who guards the first threshold. And he even says, I can only show you the door. You're the one who has to walk through it. And I mean, that's exactly his role there, is that he offers him the choice. He guides him, explains to him what's going on, that we're in a simulation. He gives all the exposition. He's the guiding light. You say, his name is Morpheus after dreams. His ship is called the Nebuchadnezzar, which is a Babylonian king, I believe, who is in the Bible, who had prophetic dreams. And he had this dream about a statue made of different different metals and materials, and couldn't interpret what the dream meant. And Daniel is able to interpret the dreams, and he tells him that that each bit of the statue is a different kingdom, and each kingdom is going to be destroyed until only one final kingdom, the strongest kingdom, will remain. So that's also, the ship is also kind of figuring into this kind of idea of fate and future prophecy and dreams. So he's clearly this mentor figure who, and he has his crew. He's got he's almost kind of like a Captain Nemo, although a bit nicer. He's got his crew, his ragtag crew of adventurers. So he's and I think we get to see a bit more about how much of a leading figure he is in the sequels. But here he's very much the mentor figure, and also he's the catalyst for allowing Neo to kind of shed all of his preconceptions and his anxieties and just let loose in the Matrix. Like he's getting kidnapped. Like because they said he's going to sacrifice. I think that isn't that what the Oracle tells him, is that he will sacrifice himself to save the one. But so like his sacrifice is what draws Neo out of his shell finally, and he does his full on, his lots of guns moment, and that whole rescue sequence, which has the big money shot, the big bullet time money shot, and everything in it. So he is not just the kind of the mentor figure, but he's also the main activist for the plot, really, and for the character's final moment. Yeah,
and so he definitely is like, he's a revolutionary. He's the father of this revolution. And there is this, I think, coding in the film of that he says when he reveals to Neo the reality of the Matrix, He says a world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you to the truth that you're a slave, and he says you're living in bondage. So again, there's almost this just almost problematic. I think again, using this narrative that is definitely comes from the enslavement of African people as catalyst for this white character to be the one. But Morpheus is the one who liberates him, who kind of lifts the veil. And also I think the fact that in the film it always seems to be driving towards him having to sacrifice himself. Like the whole thing of the Obi-Wan Kenobi moment where he just stands there and lets himself be killed. So you almost have this expectation when you first watch the film of, oh, Morpheus has to die, right? He has to die as part of the hero's journey, that he has this mentor figure, this guardian or this father figure who he then loses and then goes on to save the day. So you have that point where it seems like, oh, yeah, Morpheus is going to die. He's going to teach Neo everything he needs to do. He's served his function. He will die. And there is also that moment where he is taken by the agents and he's beaten up. And, this is like less than a decade after people had seen like the Rodney King video of, so the agents are, kind of basically law enforcement beating up Morpheus. And so there's I think there are these reference points, but thankfully, we don't have to have him be sacrificed or have him die. And he does go on to be kind of, in many ways, as much the leader of the revolution in the sequels. And also Lawrence Fishburne is so fucking cool, and like the sunglasses,
so good.
without the side.
Yeah.
What did he call them?
Arms.
Yeah.
We both wear glasses.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what they're called. Yeah.
Hooks.
Yeah.
Ear handles.
Yeah. I think he's a very important figure. So again, it's the taking of these archetypes, but then doing something slightly different with it as well. The centerpiece of the film is the moment where Neo is shown the real world, that he's been living in this simulation. And so he wakes up in the Matrix, and it is, again, this whole idea of waking up. But when he wakes up in the Matrix, he's all bald. And it's very much like a womb. It's like a birth. But it's all very horrible and quite violent. He like that whole thing where he pulls the big tube out of his mouth, and he kind of slides out. I think he's told that like all his muscles have atrophied, and because he's just been in this pod, and so he's birthed into the real world. And Morpheus says, "Welcome to the real world."
What does he say? My eyes hurt, and he says, "Because you've never used them before."
Yeah. So we kind of, and then he is told the whole story about that we gave birth to AI. And he says we spawned a race of machines, we scorched the sky. So it's this whole thing of like the machines taking over is our fault. Yeah. Is humanity's fault. It says we spawned a race of machines, we scorched the sky, we have been dependent on machines. So it's this future that has been made through our own failings.
Yeah, and so you get this glimpse of these giant harvest stacks of people and what the kind of world now looks like, and it's all very kind of Geiger-esque, and it's kind of like, we were so reliant on machines and the machines took over, but now the machines are reliant on us. It's almost like they're mirroring our behavior. I don't know if it's kind of, it's payback for us mistreating them. Now they use us as fuel, or they've, as a final kind of fuck you to humanity, that it's like, well, we're not going to destroy you, we're just going to turn you into batteries. And the whole
see
thing
how
of
you
like it,
and how they liquefy the dead and then feed them
into babies, into baby wombs,
intravenously into the people living. So
But I just wonder, like, what kind of life is that for the machines? I mean, you see later in the sequel, in the Revolutions, that you see the machine city, and it's just looks like a giant factory, and it's like they're just kind of existing. Then they're just powered by people, and they just exist just to do that. And I just, you wonder what kind of the master AI is kind of really like. You do see a bit of that in the third one, but then in the second one you see like the architect. But it feels like that the AI uses the Matrix as well to kind of see itself, or to live in its own way, because we talked about the Oracle, we got Agent Smith, we got the Architect, there's like the Merovingian in the sequels as well. There's this idea that that the programs kind of, there are these main programs that help run the system that also kind of have a bit of autonomy, even though they're kind of meant to be guided by the main program. But then you get things like which is like Agent Smith and the agents, and then you get like the Oracle, who's one of these rogue programs that seems like when faced with deletion, some programs kind of go and hide in the Matrix and like to live in there. So they must have some kind of emotional response to it. And like the Oracle especially, she loves sunrises and she's always baking and doing all these and smoking cigarettes and stuff. It's almost like they've created this fake world to keep humans docile, but they've kind of fallen in love with it. So they're kind of fallen in love with like what Agent Smith calls the peak of human civilization.
But then Agent Smith, there's that moment where he kind of says, I hate this smell.
But he hates it. Yeah.
So it's a whole thing of that he also has, I guess, these very strong feelings, but they're very negative ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if so there's almost like they've enthralled by their own creation. Even though it's a prison for humans, it's not for them, which I find is interesting.
And then also the fact that if Agent Smith and a lot of these agents hate where they are, but they're also trapped in there as well, and they're having to serve this function. Yeah, they're fulfilling their programming, but they're not liking it, which is an interesting.
But they're obviously from the way the story progresses, especially in the sequels, is that you think that there are those who do like it. And they go into hiding in order to not be deleted and to continue living there. And even I think the Architect says the Oracle is one of the actual designers of the Matrix as well. So it's like she designed this prison for humans, but kind of loves it and loves interacting with the people. And I guess there must be a group of programs that feel that humans aren't so bad, I suppose. I don't know. It complicates the kind of central conceit and doesn't make it just a good versus evil story. There are all these other layers to it. And then you've got and I think, I don't know when it came out, but they did the Animatrix series, which gave us some sort of hints as to how this all developed and things like that. So again, further complicating the story and not making it so, dare I say, binary.
Well, I guess one thing about what you were just talking about is that at the end of the first film, the Matrix still exists.
Yeah.
And so it's seen as this triumph at the end, but yet the system is still in place. And I don't know whether that was just so they could make sequels. I don't know if they actually had in mind doing a whole trilogy.
I think once Joel Silver, the producer, gave them a blank check to make the sequels, they were like, all right, let's do it. But I think at the end, it's kind of like, I think there's that ray of hope where, because Neo makes the phone call and he just says, I know you're listening, like this is just the beginning, and then he flies off like Superman into the sky. So it's to suggest that, well, the Matrix days are numbered because Neo's now become the one. He's come into his power, so he's going to just destroy it. And
I also think that over the end credits it has the song Wake Up, so maybe also like the ending is like a call to action of almost like we're still in the Matrix, it's now up to all of us. So again, it's just like, it's not just because we can't just depend on the one. We all have to wake up and see what's really in front of us.
That's right.
Which leads us to some of the philosophical underpinning of what the kind of the Matrix itself is. So there's this very telling moment near the beginning of the film where Neo, when he's first approached by some people who are trying to buy some of his like illegal software. So he has like this little like hard drive in a book. And so it's this book, but actually it's a fake book. And inside is this malware or whatever that he's about to sell on to someone. And the fake book is actually Simulations and Simulacra, which is written by Jean Baudrillard. And so the film itself, I mentioned before how, it's following on with a lot of like post-modern texts of like the 1980s, and like cyberpunk is kind of, you could say, quite postmodern in that it's this, it's this future world that's made up of references to other things, and this whole idea that there's no actual originality. It's just all this surface, all these different things referencing each other. And so Jean Baudrillard talked about this idea of simulation. So in the film, you have the Matrix being this simulation. And Jean Baudrillard talked about how, with all this proliferation of all these different media that we're getting, that arises throughout the 20th century, what we understand as kind of authentic experience is always being mediated through something else. So we can't almost distinguish now between something real and what he calls the hyperreal. And the hyperreal is this generation of bimodels of a real without origin. And so he talked about, in particular, he uses this, I think it's this short story by Borges called of Exactitude in Science. And in that, it's this story about, or it's a fable of these cartographers who draw up a map that's so detailed that it ends up covering all of the territory exactly. So it's this map that's on top of everything that's actually really there. And he says, today abstraction is no longer that of the map, the double, the mirror, the concept. So simulation is no longer that of a territory, a referential being, or a substance. It is a generation by models of a real without origin or reality, a hyperreal. So it's this whole idea that we are living in a simulation. There's always this, I can't remember where it was, but it was this whole thing that Baudrillard said that Disneyland exists so that Los Angeles seems real, that we're all living in almost this, everything just seems so fake that you need something to be really fake or kind of over the top of it that makes the other fakeness seem real. And so it's kind of telling that the book of simulacra and simulation that Neo has turns out to not actually be the book, that it's hiding something else, that it's pretend and hollow inside. And so there is this moment where Morpheus is kind of showing Neo the reality that the Matrix is covering. And he says, and he uses the term the desert of the real. And that is taken exactly from another Baudrillard essay. It says it is the real and not the map whose vestiges persist here and there in the deserts that are no longer those of the empire but ours, the desert of the real itself. So this whole idea that the desert of the real is this hyper-real world where there's just this simulation that has replaced authentic reality. So the fact that they're very overt in what they're referencing. And you could say that the film itself is kind of contributing, again, the Matrix, we're seeing the reality, but then again, that's still all fake and computer generated. So in some ways you could say the film itself is kind of contributing to this idea of this, the desert of the real, which is really interesting. But so it's just, I always like it when I see theory and practice being put together, because for years I was telling students that it was possible, and I'm like, well, here the Matrix is doing it. They're taking kind of theoretical ideas, and in fact there's this really great quote from Lana Wachowski where she was talking about actually the sequels and how people didn't like the sequels so much, and I definitely I still kind of feel that way, that I still like the original film better than the sequels. But what she says is what we were trying to achieve with the story overall was a shift, the same kind of shift that happens for Neo, that Neo goes from being in this sort of cocooned and programmed world to having to participate in the construction of meaning to his life. And we're like, well, can the audience go through the 3 movies and experience something similar to what the main character experienced? So the first movie is sort of classical in its approach. The second movie is deconstructionist, and it assaults all of the things that you thought to be true in the first movie. And so people get very upset, and they're like, stop attacking me, in the same way that people get upset with deconstructionist philosophy. I mean, Derrida and Foucault, these people upset us. And then the third movie is the most ambiguous because it actually asks you to actually participate in the construction of meaning. So when I read that quote, I'm like, that does sum up how I was feeling, how I always kind of felt about the sequels. I guess we can talk about the sequels.
I think that's a good way to talk about the sequels, which we can touch on. That is interesting, because I remember, because I always loved the first one, and I thought this, and then I remember seeing the second one and being like, this is not what I wanted.
It doesn't feel like almost from the very beginning, the Matrix Reloaded. It's like, this isn't it.
Yeah.
This isn't the Matrix.
Because it felt like it. Because you can obviously tell now, especially before when we rewatched the original, like how they actually they really didn't have that much money. Like they were being, they were having a lot of faith put in them by the producers and stuff. So it's very like when there's no big special effects going on, it is quite a contained movie in terms of locations and things like that. But then the sequel, they're obviously just give it, because it was such a hit, they're just like, here, spend all of the money. So the Matrix Reloaded, it feels very bloated and felt like there's even the bit when Agent Smith like starts duplicating himself and he just goes, more. And it's like, this is what the Wachowskis were doing, just like more. But then rewatching it, I really liked it a lot, and especially like the sequence when they go see the Merovingian, and there's the whole bit where Neo is fighting on the staircase, and they get the key. Is it the Keymaker? They've got to get the Keymaker away from the bad guys, and so Trinity and Morpheus book it with the Keymaker, and so there's the fight on the staircase, and then when they're in the car, and that leads into that car chase where they actually built a whole freeway just to make this car chase. It's brilliant stuff, like absolutely. This is action filmmaking par excellence. And what's also really good about it is that they keep Neo out of the action, because he's basically God at this point. Like he could just solve every situation, but they keep him bogged down, and like, he ends up in the mountains, so then he has to take time to fly across back to the city. So he's got to do that and so you're reminded how kick-ass Morpheus and Trinity are. And it just goes on. This sequence just goes on and on and on. But it's so thrilling. They just keep upping the ante each time. And it kind of reminded me like of the in Raiders of the Lost Ark, when Indy has to get the Ark from the Nazis, and the whole bit where he has to go from like truck to truck, but like blown up to like times 100. And I think like it's just really excellent action filmmaking on display. But in terms of like the story, I think they really try to like expand the mythology, and it does get a bit convoluted. But I do kind of, I like how they undercut, again, like what you were saying about where it's like they say, oh, you're not the one, like you're the only one of a series of ones. This has happened before. You're not special. You're a symptom of the symptom. You're not a bug. You're a feature. And it almost feels like it makes you also, and I think in Revolutions they also question this about maybe even the real world, like Zion or all that. Maybe that is still the Matrix, and that maybe it's almost like the whole idea of Zion and a resistance is again a simulation to keep us docile. Like humans need an outlet. Like in the first one, Smith says, "We created a perfect utopia for you, but you couldn't believe it, so we had to bring back this version of civilization with all the war and the crime and stuff, because you have to feel miserable to feel alive." But I think also we have to feel like we're fighting some great fight, and it's almost like it's like they create another simulation on top of the Matrix of this resistance, because that's another way to keep us placated. It's like in ancient Rome, they would have, the Caesar would get, the mob would get angry at Caesar, so he'd put on games at the Colosseum and satisfy the bloodlust, and then everyone's fine again. Or in terms of like, you say the Matrix was our Star Wars, like the idea of like Disney, I always go after Disney about this, the corporation who are kind of basically the empire, right? Putting out Star Wars movies to make you forget about, so we can, it's basically like the Star Wars allows us to feel like we're the rebels fighting this great evil empire, but that we get our jollies that way. So then when we leave the cinema, we don't just start questioning our authority, and start questioning things, because we've already exercised that. So I think like I think the AI realizes this, and I think that's why. Because in Revolutions, he does a bit where he even uses his Neo powers on the Sentinel bug things, which suggests to me that it's like maybe they're still in the simulation. Maybe none of it's real. And I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. And I also remember the ending of I forgot that at the end of Revolutions, that again, the Matrix still exists. The AI is still in control. Zion just gets to live to fight another day, even if they're actually real. Like Neo just gets taken away, like, and presumably like plugged back into the Matrix, which is what you find out has happened in Resurrections, which is the one that came out, which I think is a byproduct of. Is it Lily Wachowski who directed that? But not.
I think it's Lana.
Lana.
Yeah.
of like they're gonna make the film anyway with or without our input. So I'm gonna make it just so we can hold on, so it's still ours. And I actually find Resurrection's really interesting because again it's that meta. It's quite a meta thing of like, here we are, we're doing this again. And it's kind of this remix of the first film in an interesting way, I think. Sorry, I've talked a lot, Lindsay.
No, yeah. No, I mean, it also makes me think a lot of Blade Runner again, and like Blade Runner 2049 is also like, why does this film need to exist? And it's kind of, it is interrogating the nostalgia associated with it. I mean, it was funny watching the sequels. So I remember seeing Matrix Reloaded at the cinema the day it came out because everyone just could not wait for the sequel because The Matrix had been so huge. It only comes out, I think, a couple of years. I think it's like 2001 it comes out. So it's only a couple of years after the first Matrix. And I remember it starts and a lot of it is like in Zion and watching it again, I'm like, well, this isn't The Matrix. This doesn't feel...
That whole rave sex scene thing is not great.
Yeah, it just goes on and I was just like, this is not right. But then as I was watching it again, I mean, like you say, that freeway sequence, but just the fact that at one point you got like is it the Goss brothers who are basically like ghost vampire werewolves or something? And it's just like, what is going on? It's just so much. And I was actually like, yeah, I'm kind of digging this because this is just like ridiculous and so much. And like it is more. Yeah.
Just more.
And I remember at the time and thinking though, that with the sequels, it was that no one was telling the Wachowskis no because they had so much success with the first one. It was just like, we're just going to give them whatever they want. Yeah. We're just going to go for it. So, yeah, it was... But then watching it again, I quite liked it. But then as it goes on, and then with the architect, and it's just like ergo concordantly, like all this ridiculous doublespeak. I remember I was like listening to his whole monologue and going, I don't even know what you're talking about, which I'm assuming is part of the point. But it was just getting so convoluted and a bit too like it's seeming like felt like it was really cleverer than it actually is. So there is that. And then when I saw Revolutions, I had never actually seen it before until just recently because by the time that third film came out, and I just remember it being so rejected by most people. People were like, yeah, this is terrible. Like I hadn't really heard anyone say a good word about the third film that I just didn't even bother going to see it. And it's only until just recently for this that I actually saw it. And it definitely, for me, it is the lesser film of the three. There's
not enough Matrix in it. I mean, unless the real world is the Matrix, like I said. But like, I just felt let down that it wasn't all in the Matrix, you know.
Just my interest was waning. And it just felt, it does feel bloated. Yeah. That there's too much. And also the fact that Trinity ends up sacrificing herself, that annoys me.
Well, she dies in the second one, right? And
the third one.
No, but she dies in the second one. He brings her back, so he gets to save her life. Yeah. Only for her to die again for real. I think that's also it's a bit of a fuck you to the audience in a way. It's like. It's it's weird. It's a weird one because he has to go alone. It's because the whole thing is he has to confront the machines at the end alone. That sort of thing. It does get a bit, and like he gets blinded, and like there's all this stuff where he's blind. Like it's just it's hat on a hat on a hat. There's just too much stuff happening. Yeah. I think. Yeah. And I mean, I like the sequences in all the guys in their mechs like fighting off. Like some of that's pretty good, but it does go on and on and on. Yeah. Like for a really long time.
Yeah. But I think we should also just acknowledge the impact that the film has had on the culture in general, for good and ill. I mean, I mentioned earlier, you know, that Lana and Lily Wachowski have both talked about how, you know, there was this kind of underlying subtext about this awakening of their transness and how there has been this trans reading that has kind of helped a lot of people and meant a lot to other people. And Lily Wachowski, she was talking about, you know, she says, I'm glad that people are talking about the movies, the Matrix movies with a trans narrative and how, that it's helped people. In the original script, there is the character of Switch who is played by a woman in the film, but originally the character of Switch would switch genders, that they were a man in the real world and a woman in the Matrix. And it's this whole thing of in the simulation, the fake kind of presenting them as a man and that who they really are as a woman.
The producers wouldn't allow it though, right?
Yes, yeah. Lily was also saying that, especially for me and Lana, we were existing in this space where the worlds didn't exist, so we were always living in a world of imagination. And so this whole idea that the film is all about this mix of different elements and different genres. And it was this whole idea of creating worlds, creating different things. So I freed us up as filmmakers because we were able to imagine stuff at the time that you didn't necessarily see on screen. And so I think in our transness and our queerness, we were trying to incorporate as many things as possible. It's just like trying to visualize within a much larger infinite scope of the imagination. So it was through this work of their imagination that they found their real selves, which is really amazing.
Beautiful. And
the fact that it helps other people. But on the flip side of that, we have unfortunately this whole like term of like being red pilled, and this concept of the red pill, which has been adopted by, I guess you'd call it the manosphere, that there's all these like online forums and like MRA, like men's rights activists, and like Andrew Tate always spouting this misogynist stuff alongside using terms about like the Matrix and this whole idea awakening men apparently to the supposed reality that men are the oppressed gender in a society dominated by feminism. Poor guys.
Oh, I'm convinced. I was on the fence, but now that you've read it that way.
That apparently, there's this whole thing that they believe feminists and political correctness obscures reality. Right. And this whole idea that men are the victims.
So to them, like the sort of the way that like the male hegemony is the Matrix. I don't understand what they're trying to say.
I know. It's this whole thing. No, but that's just the whole thing that in reality they're victims, and that actually feminists rule the world or something.
Sure.
And yeah, but then also I guess feminists are always playing the victim. But then they're saying no, we're the victims. I don't know. Yeah, but it's unfortunate that it's been co-opted. It's just the thing is that I always say, text can be interpreted in a variety of ways, but then you do have what I almost feels like.
But there are wrong ways.
Yeah, it's a shame. But we kind of end on that note.
Well, I think no matter what your interpretation, I think we can all agree that The Matrix is one of the seminal films, not just of the 90s, but of the modern era. I mean, it's a benchmark film. It's something that's kind of, you can kind of see there's a line it draws of like before and after The Matrix, right? That it had such a massive impact on pop culture and cinema and everything. I mean, I remember when the film, after the film came out, every sci-fi action film did some kind of bullet timey thing. Wire work was everywhere. Yeah, so I think its influence is definitely far-reaching. I think it did change a lot of sci-fi action cinema from that point on. Yeah. All right, now let's move on to our second film. We're going to get way dark now and talk about Red Rooms.
Monsieur Chevalier, vous êtes accusé de 3 chefs distincts de meurtre, outrage aux cadavres et production et distribution de matériel obscène.
Mon client plaide de non coupable, monsieur le juge.
Tu sais que c'est sa fête bientôt? Dans 3 semaines, ouais. Tu penses qu'il essaie de faire un cadeau?
J'ai un petit mot à dire à ces groupies, celles qui hantent la salle d'audience à chaque jour. Ben, on vous voit.
Ludovic Chevalier est l'auteur de ces meurtres qu'il a filmés pour un auditoire prêt à payer pour voir ça en direct dans ce qu'on appelle des chambres rouges.
Je l'entends de voir ça, on entend ça.
Non, on l'entend jamais.
Comment tu sais ça?
Okay, so Red Rooms from 2023. In this film, we follow Kelly Ann, who works as a model but spends most of her days attending the trial of Ludovic Chevalier, who's been accused of the heinous torture and murder of 3 teenage girls, which were filmed and then sold on the dark web. The trial is subject to extensive media coverage, and also present at the trial is Francine, the mother of one of the victims, Camille, whose video has not been found. There's still some speculation as to whether the man in the videos is Chevalier, as his face is masked. Kellyanne lives alone in her apartment in a high-rise building overlooking Montreal. She's often online and is highly tech-savvy, making extra money on online poker and customizing her own AI, which she calls Guinevere. Kellyanne meets Clementine, who is also at the trial and is convinced of Chevalier's innocence. Clementine rails against the injustice that she feels is being done to Chevalier in television interviews at the courthouse, and also calls into a TV panel show protesting that the evidence has been manipulated to frame him. Kellyanne doesn't explain her interest in the case or her feelings about Chevalier. We see her stalking Francine online and hacking into her email account to find the code to bypass security at her house. The day that the jury is set to be shown the 2 videos of the torture and murder of 2 of the girls, the courtroom is cleared. Clementine wants to see the videos and Kellyanne reveals she has copies of them. They both watch the videos and Clementine becomes so disturbed she decides to go home. Kellyanne continues to attend the trial, and on Chevalier's birthday she arrives in the courtroom dressed as Camille in her school uniform. She's forcibly removed from the courtroom and then is fired by her modelling agency. Kellyanne gains access to a bidding room where the video of Camille's torture and murder is being auctioned off. Using her gambling winnings, she successfully bids on the video. Believing that she's now being surveilled, Kellyanne destroys the AI in a blender and watches the video. She then goes to Francine's house in the night, dressed in the school uniform outfit, poses for a selfie in Camille's room, and places the hard drive with the video on Francine's bedside table. The film ends with news footage revealing that the video provides definitive proof it was Chevalier, leading to him pleading guilty. Clementine gives a television interview where she expresses regret for ever supporting Chevalier and says that her thoughts are now with the victims. So, this film, it was released in 2023 on the festival circuit, and then it showed up for us here in the UK on the BFI player about a year ago, so towards the end of last year. And I remember we both watched it. I'd heard a few things about the film. It seemed really interesting. And then we were just so blown away by the film.
Couldn't stop thinking about it after watching it.
So, I mean, is it an instant classic? What was it that impacted you about the film?
It's restraint and its confidence in its restraint and its kind of its uneasiness. I think it's really hard balance to strike to make a film this enigmatic that doesn't have easy answers, and you just kind of have to navigate yourself and come to your own conclusions, and it presents a lot of stuff at you in a really understated way that just raises so many questions. And even after we watched it again for this episode, I have even more questions and I have more theories. And just to be able to do that, I think it's a film I'm recommending to everybody, and it's so dark and violent in its intention, not in its intentions, but in the story that it's grappling with. But everything is about what you don't see, and it's such a strong piece of filmmaking it just has such an impact. And I think is it a classic? I don't know. I mean, I hope it becomes kind of this cult classic, almost like, you know, the idea that there's these Red Room videos, like maybe it could become something like a weird artifact in that way, of that, you know, people go, have you seen Red Rooms, you know, and it can be kind of an initiation almost for people to watch this film, because not that it's really violent and confronting. It's not. But in its implications of what it doesn't show you, it just makes you think of it, and it's kind of implicates you in it as well, which I think, like, you just see I'm rambling about it because it's like it's a hard film to pin down, but that's its strength, I think.
Yeah, I think it feels like I can feel some influences, like it definitely feels of a piece of like what Michael Haneke does, like with Funny Games, but then with Funny Games, I've always felt like Haneke was there wagging his finger at us saying you shouldn't be liking this, you shouldn't be enjoying this, almost like telling you off. And this film, it confronts us with, I guess, where we're at and where we're going with our relationship with the online world. And it goes back to what I say a lot about Blade Runner and what I was saying with Cyberpunk, this increasingly technologized world, what is it doing to us as human beings? So I kind of feel like this is a really good place for us to end this season on AI and technofear, because it really is about this current moment. It isn't a kind of far-flung, fantastical future. And the technology, there is no, like, I was thinking about, like, we talked about, I don't know, Demon Seed or Ex Machina, or like these crazy tech that's going to go out of control. The tech is just the tech in the film. It's totally what we already have around us every day. But it's really, I think, exploring what it's doing to us as people, as human beings. Also, I think, you know, our obsession with true crime, which has become something that's become so popular. There's so many like true crime podcasts and documentaries and things. And so it is, I guess, just asking the questions about what is it that's making us drawn to this really disturbing material. But yet I also feel like it isn't admonishing us for liking this. It's just that in some ways it isn't really like it's implicating us, and it's asking the questions and making us question why we engage with this material. But then I also don't feel like it's telling us that we shouldn't, almost. Like it isn't the finger wagging that I get with something like Funny Games. I think you were saying before, like it's just so enigmatic and ambiguous what it is actually saying, but it's just confronting us with it, and that's and where it makes you go and what it makes you question about yourself is the disturbing part of it. So at the center of it all are these crimes, these murders of these really, really young girls. Like they're all like 13, 14 years old. And this whole idea that not only have they been murdered, but that it's been filmed and that it's being sold as entertainment. And it's this whole idea of murder being turned into entertainment, but also being turned into a commodity. It's almost like, has Chevalier committed those absolutely heinous crimes? So we hear it described. In fact, the very first scene of the film is this amazing, like, long takes, tracking shots around the courtroom. Incredible. You see Kelly arrive, she goes through security and she's sitting down and the trial is just beginning, and you have the prosecutor who comes up and she describes in detail what has happened, that the murder and the torture, like it's really prolonged, horrific torture of these girls has been filmed. And it's this whole thing that the person doing it in the videos, are they actually doing it, say, for their own pleasure? We always think that most serial killers are doing this to kind of almost get off on the torture and the sadism. But it almost seems like it's all being done really with the purpose of to be filmed and then to be sold on the internet. So it's almost like, is this person doing this even getting anything from it, or are they just thinking about
the money,
the profit? And so it's this whole thing of profiting off off someone. People are out there like trying to search down this material. So it's really going into this whole thing of like this idea of, I guess, the dark web and the deep web and red rooms, and how it just seems to. It's that whole kind of chicken and egg thing. Are the existence of the red rooms or dark web spaces pushing us into these depraved areas, or is it just a product of our depraved desires that were always there? But the thing is that now anyone who kind of has this, even if people have those urges, not all of them would go ahead and do it. Or I don't know. It's just that this material now exists, and what is it doing to people that it exists? I don't know. It's, again, I'm rambling now because it's just really asking all these really difficult questions.
Well, I think going back to what you were saying before about this technology, it's a good film to end on, because the technology in this film there's nothing that doesn't exist right now, and what it's kind of saying is that the technology is indifferent. it's what we do with it. It's like what opportunities it provides for us, and the only thing is basically our imagination and our boundaries. Like how far are you willing to go to use this technology to your own ends? And I think because you see there's so many things that you don't see in this film, and it's the whole thing about the dark web and the deep web is it's to leave you to decide, like, do you think things like this should exist or not? Because I think they do say in the courtroom that essentially, like, the dark web or the deep web, when you use Tor servers to hide your address and things like that, these can be used for positive things. They can be used, to help protect people. So if you live in a society that has a oppressive regime, it can help you get the word out and communicate with people outside your country. It can help you avoid the authorities in that way. But then also that comes with the other side, where it's like, well, it also can allow people to do all kinds of heinous shit and open up black markets for all kinds of fucked up stuff. But I think the film also goes to show that that's only part of like an ecosystem of just reality of how we live our lives now in this technologized world. Even TV shows, which and the news, like the film kind of presents this violence as fragmented, like, data almost. Like, there's videos, there's rumors, cryptocurrency transactions. It's commodified. Like how suffering is commodified. Like, even the news reports. Like, whenever there's a horrible news story, and then even on breakfast TV, they say, "Oh, we're going to tell you this story," and the images may cause distress or maybe disturbing. But it's like, but that's why you're showing it, because that's what we want to see. And the film, I was go back to my point of the film, how it pulls back on things and what it doesn't show you. It's asking us those questions, like, the refusal that implicates us. It forces us to confront our own curiosity, and it's like, is it better to see or not? And it's kind of like it's almost like we have to, like when she shows the video, like you do hear the videos but you don't see it, but almost like hearing it is too much. Like, it's almost like we have to see to kind of like break the spell almost, to make it real. Or like we have to see, but do we? Is it? And Kellyanne is someone who sees, and Clementine is someone who hasn't seen, but so she's created this fictional version of what's going on because she hasn't seen the videos, but Kellyanne has seen the videos, so she's much more, she's kind of got a completely different point of view. But yeah, see, again, it's like I'm rambling again. It's like there's so many things to think about, and I think this fragmentation and this denial to make us think and implicate ourselves and go and make our decision about, would you watch the video or not? And I think there's always this, what the director's doing is kind of saying to you, like, there's this release that we need to see. It would be a release, wouldn't it? Or would it not? Or would it be? But you can't unsee it once you have seen it. So it's like, what are your boundaries? Technology is just going to be technology, but what are your boundaries? Because
the technology doesn't have the boundaries or the morality,
it has none of that.
But we do. But what I find interesting is that this story is all being done through two female characters. So it's well known that as big as true crime is, a lot of that is because of the majority of the audience for a lot of true crime are women. It has so there's something about like true crime that women seem to respond to, and I think about myself. I mean, I get asked all the time, "Why do you watch horror movies? How could you like horror movies?" And it's this. I think there's similarities with true crime, and even like I mean, I've always been kind of fascinated by serial killers. I've read books about like profilers and about serial killers and things. I do find it really interesting, and I think there's a lot that's been kind of written about why do women like this stuff, and some of it is kind of, in some ways, it is about trying to get control, because the world is a scary place, and women are usually the victims of these heinous crimes. And we're constantly reminded that we are vulnerable in the world. And so you often do kind of think of ways of trying to get some control, because you do feel kind of completely powerless in the world around you. And you kind of want to try and reclaim some of that power. So in some ways, it's like by confronting, the fact that there are men out there that will do these awful things. And it's almost like maybe arming yourself with some knowledge, or sometimes you do think, oh, well, if I'm in that situation, what would I do? Or how would I get out of it? So so we do have in the film, it is always the question is, what is Kellyanne doing there? Why is she going there? And I think she really is trying to always gain control over everything. She's trying to gain control over like the information that's put out there, that she uses all these kind of the dark web and the deep web to I guess kind of keep some of her privacy. And the whole thing is that she is incredibly private, like we have no access to her whatsoever in any way. But also, a lot of some of the writing that has happened about the film is that it's also looking at this whole idea of hybristophilia. Which is basically this idea of having sexual interest in and attraction to those who commit crimes. So it's also sometimes referred to as Bonnie and Clyde syndrome. And so it's also about this idea of, you hear all the time about how serial killers get all these groupies. Like Charles Manson had heaps of groupies. Ted Bundy had heaps of groupies. I think he even ended up marrying some woman that he met. So this whole idea that really violent criminals and serial killers get groupies, get women who are like writing to them and seem to be attracted to them. So there's also that aspect of it. I think mostly more through the Clementine character, because like Clementine, it's almost like she keeps saying, I see something in him, it's his eyes, and that she almost seems like she's in love with him. And so there is this phenomena, that hybristophilia, that is about this whole attraction mostly women have to violent men, violent criminals. There's this aspect to the film as well, is are Kellyanne and Clementine attracted to Chevalier? Are they groupies? And you have also the character of Francine, which is the mother of one of the victims. And she's at one point, she says in one of her, like, she's confronted by a reporter after one of the days in the courtroom, and she says, I want to say something to all the groupies, his groupies. I think she says, I see you and you are obscene or something. And so there's that aspect to it of like the audience of true crime, and particularly I think the female attraction maybe to crime or even to criminals. So there's that aspect of the film that I think that's being dealt with. But yeah, also there's our relationship with technology in the online space. So from what I can gather, there's the deep web and the dark web, but it's all basically, like you said, it's more about kind of just hiding your identity or like trying to protect your privacy online. Like that's how a lot of these aspects of the internet are being used. The deep web, apparently the deep web is huge, and then the dark web is a kind of more specific aspect of the web that can host a kind of anonymous content, and that part of that can be this illegal content. And the whole idea of the Red Room, apparently it's a myth, an internet myth, relates to an early a Japanese urban legend about this supposed pop-up ad that would flash up on screen, and it would basically, this whole ad of saying, come here and you'll see essentially snuff films. So it's this whole idea that there are these red rooms that exist online, that exist in the dark web. But the whole thing is that it's kind of like the whole myth of the snuff film. For years and years, there were whole tales of snuff film, but often they never really actually found snuff films. But then once the internet happened, you did get footage of real murders. I mean, I remember like in the early 2000s, there was a whole thing of like videos of people being beheaded by terrorist groups and things would be accessible to almost anyone online. But this whole thing that there are these red rooms that are basically videos of graphic violence, of torture, of child abuse. But most stories about red rooms have turned out to be fake, and that actually a lot of them are sites for violent content, but they're mostly just scams. The film is kind of exploring these new kind of urban legends, I guess, about snuff films and about this idea of does a red room actually exist? Can you go on the dark web and find actual torture, like videos of torture and murder? It's something that I believe hasn't really been proven, but this film is kind of exploring that what if these things actually existed, and what if you were able to get access to them? Would you want to get access to them? So
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess that's the other thing that technology does as well, considering it's this indifferent technology, and it's all about the impact that these things have on us and how we place importance onto them, and the way it can spiral out of control or build up into these legends. I mean, if we're talking about films about snuff films, there was like 8mm with Nicolas Cage. There's always been this, there was that point where Charlie Sheen watched a film and gave it to the FBI.
The guinea pig.
It was a guinea pig film. And there are filmmakers out there making like fake for snuff films, like, that where you question, like, who is this for? Like, why would you, watch this for fun? Because, they've got no plots, but they're just people being tortured and murdered. It's all fake, but like, it just feels kind of unsavory.
But then I've always been interested in kind of extreme cinema. But I remember one time when a friend of ours put on August Underground just randomly one night.
That's what I was thinking of.
And I remember having a thought, like, it was just on, and I was just looking at it going, because I hadn't, it's before I had really heard much about August Underground. And I remember I had a moment of, oh shit, he's actually downloaded this real stuff, and I was like, and I had that moment of like, oh my God, oh no. So I actually was questioning whether what I was seeing was real or not. But then I read more about the making of August Underground, and that a lot of it was that they were like filmmakers that were trying to see how real they could be. And there was even tales, I don't know whether this is true or not, that they even wanted to leave videotapes of that film like in playgrounds or something, because if you just picked that up and then you put it in, you would absolutely have thought it was real. Yeah. And so I'm
but that would have led to investigations and things.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine it wouldn't have ended well to have done that, especially if like a child ended up watching it. Yeah, that would damage them psychologically. Sure. But I think it's completely legitimate for filmmakers to push the boundaries and to extreme, and even the whole idea of like just exploring how can you use special effects and makeup effects to create something that seems indistinguishable from reality. And it can explore some really interesting ideas, bringing up all these questions that we're asking, that we're talking about, that these films can do that. And it's interesting because where I was working previously, I was supervising a PhD from my student Grace. I don't know if she listens to this at all, and she was looking at these extreme cinema. And it was funny because I remember when I was a PhD student, and my PhD was on like the Marquis de Sade, and I was looking at supposedly like extreme films, but I was looking at like Salo or something like that. And now that seems completely quaint almost compared to some of the extreme horror films that are being made now. And I remember my supervisor being like, whoa, this stuff is pretty out there. And then when Grace would talk to me about some of the films that she would have to know, like the whole phenomenon of mixtapes that happens now, where people edit material online and they take scenes from like extreme horror films, so like fictional films, and they edit it together with kind of documentary or actuality footage of violent stuff, like actual violent material, and they edit it all together. So the real and the fake are mixed up together and then put out there. And so people are consuming this content, but also becoming creators in a sense. So it's this really, really interesting area. But I remember thinking, I don't want to watch.
Well, again, it's all about what are your boundaries.
Yeah, and as I'm getting older, I'm starting to like, maybe I don't need to see this anymore. So it's funny, like this whole idea of in the film of like, who is Kellyanne? And as I was watching it, we have no insight into her, but I remember as like watching it, I identify a lot with her character weirdly. But this whole idea of wanting to see, like when I was younger, like when I was doing my PhD, it's like if I heard about a film that had made someone vomit or faint or something, I was like, I need to watch this. And like I had this desire, like I wanted to see how far I could go. I wanted to see how extreme I could get with what I was watching. And so with Kellyanne, this whole thing of pushing the boundaries and also like trying to gain control over everything. I don't know. I weirdly did identify a lot with.
It was a point of pride to stay in a film in a cinema while people were walking out and just being like, lightweights. Like I can survive.
Like
this.
I remember when I went and saw Irreversible, I started counting people as they left the cinema, and I'm like, oh, look at them.
Or like Snowtown. I remember when we saw Snowtown, there's a lot of a lot of walkouts on that.
Yeah, but this is stuff that is real, and so it's this whole thing of like, it's one thing to like watch what you know is a fictional film like August Underground, and it's also there is that difference, I think, between watching what is essentially not a film; it's evidence of a crime. And this whole thing of like, wanting to see that. So when I first watched the film, I remember thinking, I thought it was going to end up being like a revenge story. I thought there was going to be some connection that Kellyanne had to the crime. Yeah. Like I thought, is she going to end up being like the sister of one of the victims, or that she was going to like avenge these girls, or I don't know, or that there was going to be some trauma that she had in her past that was revealed as to. And the film doesn't give you any of that.
Her motivations are completely opaque.
Yes, like we don't get any. Yeah, we don't know. Like, did she have some trauma that is making her, interested in this crime? I don't know. And it's funny because I was reading a few of the reviews that I found online, and there was this one from Screen Anarchy by Martin Kudlak where it says Kellyanne's character soon reveals a darker truth. She's not merely a fan but a sociopath. So there was this one review saying that she's a sociopath. Then there was this other review from David Ryan and said the biggest problem is that Kellyanne's attitude towards Chevalier remains unclear for most of the film. The film falters in its reluctance to explain more deeply Kellyanne's choices. Her actions lack the psychological context needed to fully understand her motivation. But the film does suggest that an empathic understanding for both criminals and victims should have sensible boundaries because hyper-empathy is too toxic by far. We are left to surmise that Kellyanne possesses some trauma and we're too unsure about her past and pre-existing conditions to comprehend how they influence her strategic choices. So that review was actually saying that because we don't understand her motivations, that's actually a failing of the film. And I think like that's kind of the point. Yeah, that we don't have that access. There are sort of all these interpretations that, the Kellyanne is a sociopath, that she's able to watch these videos because she has no empathy. Or is it that she has too much empathy, or that she has this trauma in her past? It's like there's so many differing interpretations of why she's there. Why is she there?
So I have some thoughts. And so she lives this isolated life. She's fluent in digital systems. She's a model, so she's known to be like she spends her life being looked at but not seen. Like she's always in a costume or a mask. She's appreciated and commodified for her beauty, for her physical appearance. But we don't really ever know what she is on the inside. We get glimpses, I think. But what's stood out for me on the second viewing was she has this transactional mentality, right? There's this idea of transactions. Like she does these online gambling, and she says that the numbers are easy but like emotions seem to be be messy. But she mediates her whole life through these screens. And yeah, this transactional thing, which makes me think of why, she leaves because I think when she leaves the video for the family at the end, I think that reframes a lot of what we see her doing. But she still breaks in and takes the selfies in the room. It's almost like there's this, and also the idea of watching these videos and there's a transaction taking place there. Like you're giving something of yourself over when you watch the videos. So a piece of you is taken away from you, I think, but you also gain knowledge. Especially with the Camille video, but she's like taking these selfies and it's almost like because you wonder through her investigations, like, oh, she's trying to get to the bottom of it, but is she? And then you start to doubt that her motivations are all that pure. And that is she this fan girl, and she's got this obsession with Camille. She dresses in the school uniform. And I think this reveals how kind of the images mutate meaning, and that all these things start to blur together, like innocence, violence, like fetishization, like the whole idea that like these are schoolgirls, like also adds to this idea of like, you know, because it's these young girls being murdered, like that adds another layer of like horror and boundary pushing.
And the whole thing of the schoolgirl uniform and the role that plays.
But I think this whole thing with the Camille thing and we see the bloodied schoolgirl uniform and we see the images of, and like the jawbone with the braces on it. We see images and then we're left to compile them. And then with Kellyanne, I think like, I also get this feeling that like she's dressing as Camille in the courtroom to be seen by Chevalier. It's on his birthday. You feel, but I also kind of feel like she's trying to conjure Camille back into existence in a way, because her video is the one that nobody has. Her fate is still, not known, even though we know we found her body and we pretty much know. It's almost like she's trying to like bring her back and conjure her back up, so then the video becomes available, and she almost like destroys her life in order to get this video. But yet the transaction is like she has to go and take these selfies as well.
She gets to take the selfie.
And so I think there's this deeper thought I had about all of this, that maybe she's like this digital avatar in the human world in a way, like our obsession with technology and this digital world that kind of lives underneath our own has almost conjured up Kellyanne to kind of be almost this like, she's not like an angel of vengeance, but she's kind of this figure that has now appeared and is acting as almost this broker for this violence and like this violent world that's kind of we've conjured through the technology. And I mean, that can kind of lead us into, it's almost like it's our collective unconscious almost, but it's this digital, it's almost like, it's funny, we did Pulse recently, and it's almost like this is what Kiyoshi Kurosawa was kind of warning us about. Like with Pulse, that was like the internet had just happened, and it's like, well, what are the implications of this? It's going to draw us together, but it's also going to create, there's also this darkness that's inherent in the technology. And I think this is almost like the end, or the point that he was warning us about, and almost like where these ghosts in Pulse are kind of coming out of using technology and coming out into the real world. I think you could interpret Kellyanne is kind of like that, of this like manifestation. And that kind of leads us to, she's got this like AI, this Guinevere, which she speaks to and kind of helps organize her life. And it reflects kind of her loneliness, but also her desire for control. And it's kind of a connection to the real world. Like she says, she disconnected it from the cloud and trained, because she said immediately it went racist. And then she trains it on Google and Wikipedia, and then almost keeps it offline. Like it's just like she almost air gaps it. So it's just for her own means. So it allows her to communicate with the world, but it's not, she's safeguarding it from corruption by the digital world. Almost like because she's from there. She knows like what it's capable of, so she's trying to safeguard it from there. And so when she does destroy it, it's almost an act of self-erasure or like a disconnection from the real world, because she's finally, because now it's seen as a thing of paranoia in the moment, but maybe she's just preparing herself to return to the digital world, right? And she's removing these things, because in the very end of the film we see this very weird shot outside her window, and it's almost like we start to see that digital bleed, and so I feel it's almost like that's her kind of returning to the internet. That's my hot take.
Oh, it's funny because it reminds me that this quote from Pascal Plante where he's talking about the camera movements, and he said, I tried to create that logic where it's very slow and choreographed, but also that thematically we're in the head of Kellyanne. It's like this ghost floating around, or this robot. She's very much in control. So we wanted to have a camera that was hanging from above, not on the ground, kind of just floating. So it's like she is almost like these ghosts, like I think of Pulse again. But then for me, it's so much about her seeing.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing of that she works as a model, so she's looked at, and the whole thing, like you go back to like the ideas around the theory of the male gaze in the cinema, that the woman is to be looked at. But then what you have in this film is that she then takes up the gaze. She's the one. It's all about her looking. And I swear there are moments in the film where she looks straight into the camera. Like she is the bearer of the look in the film. And yeah, she has this double life online where she's anonymous. So there's all these images of her and her like in her work as a model. But then she has this other self that is completely anonymous online. And she's so controlling of her identity, I guess, and her privacy, that she uses all these things on the deep web and has her own kind of customized AI. But then also alongside that, this other quote from Pascal Plante where he's talking about hybristophilia and also the spectrum of fans of serial killers, and that Kellyanne and Clementine are two opposite sides of the spectrum. Where Clementine is in total denial, blinded by love. And he says the more sociopathic side of the spectrum might be Kellyanne. I don't label her that because that's oversimplification. But he also says she's a junkie about something. We can call it adrenaline, potentially. Everything she does, from the gambling to the home invading to what she does in the courtroom with the cosplay, it's almost nurturing this sense of danger in order to feel alive. She's in such major leagues that she needs a higher dosage. If you compare that to any other addiction, there's a term for it when addicts need more and more after the first hit to try and have the same rush. She's obsessively chasing something but has to go to lower and lower depths. So there's this whole thing that she's
trying to feel alive.
Yeah. And she maybe feels alive by seeing, by not just being looked at, but by seeing, by being. And then again, I think it's this control that she wants as well, maybe controlling how she reacts, because she's always controlled. Like even when she's watching the videos, she doesn't have any emotion. In fact, a performance by the actress, what's her name again? Juliette Garipé. I'm probably not saying her name correctly, but it reminds me of Isabelle Huppert, or you could get in The Piano Teacher and in Elle. I mean, Elle definitely. She's dealing with these very dark things, these very dark desires. And her face always portrays nothing and also everything at the same time. So I'm just always attracted to these types of female characters. And again, weirdly sometimes identifying with them. Yeah. But again, like I said before, I have that thing. I had that thing of like, I want to see, I can't. And sometimes it is that whole thing of like, you need to go further and you need to go further. So I totally understand that aspect of it. And
I think there's an aspect of when she dresses up as Camille in the courtroom. Like, that's a thing of wanting to be seen, because she wants Chevalier to look at her the way he like to look at her dressed like that, because it's almost like a look with meaning, like to be seen with meaning. In a way, like, you know, if she's seen as a model, she's looked at for, you know, oh, look at those nice clothes and that beautiful body. But to have someone look at her with like intention, almost like it's...
And also using like herself, like the clothes and the hair and things to provoke this reaction. Yeah. But then it's also like, she obviously wants Chevalier to be seen, to see her. But it's almost like, is she trying, like you said, trying to conjure up Camille? I don't know. It almost seems like, is she wanting to get a reaction from Chevalier? Like because he also has he's not betraying any emotional reaction. Like there's this one bit where they're describing all the crimes and he just starts kind of looking at his nails and kind of picking at his nails like, whatever. And so it's almost like, is she trying to get a rise out of him to show that he's actually guilty? I don't know. That was another aspect of maybe why she did that as well.
Oh, they keep talking because in the videos you can only see his eyes, and it's almost like I want those eyes to look at me. I don't know. It's there's so many questions.
I know, because there's this whole thing of, and it's funny. Another thing that I read in the Pascal Plante interview was that he was saying that Clementine keeps talking about Chevalier's eyes and how she just looks in his eyes and knows he could never do this. And Pascal Plante was saying that both the actress who plays Clementine and the actor who plays Chevalier have very similar eyes. So this whole thing about eyes and looking is central to the film. But yeah, also Kellyanne's relationship with, I guess, seeing and her own image, but then also her use of AI. Another thing that Plante said is that being a hacker type person or tech savvy is almost a superpower, and that Kellyanne is filmed like this otherworldly, super powerful entity, very enigmatic, but she has that sense of power to her. I did a lot of research about hackers, the mindsets, the culture and all of that, and I didn't want the hacking to feel like a brute force hacking, matrix-like numbers running in front of the screen. That's less relatable. What is relatable is the social engineering side of hacking, where I basically use the flaw of the person against them, and now our flaws. We put so many traces of ourselves out there. Yeah. We gladly sacrifice all things that are private and that should be private just for the sake of us going about our own lives in an efficient way. But somebody can really take advantage of that. And I think about that scene where Kellyanne is going through looking up the mother, Francine, the mother of Camille, and how she just very quickly and very efficiently manages, I think she finds an email address and then manages to, use all these things.
She finds their security system, knows what model it is, then she figures a way to hack into that to find
and she just
code.
She just goes into her email. She hacks into her email and then just looks up and searches in the email and finds someone's photo, has a photo of someone with the code.
With the code,
And it's this whole, and it makes you think we do, how many times do we just put so much of our privacy out there?
Power over to technology, it just becomes this thing that we don't even think about now, but it can be exploited and used in so many different ways. And it's like they're talking about people, people who use the deep web are inherently doing bad things, and it's like, well, maybe we should all be doing using that because it's so easy for people to just pluck this stuff out of the wires and use it.
I mean, it's also interesting to think that you have these two women, Kellyanne and Clementine. I mean, should we talk a bit about Clementine?
Yeah, absolutely.
What were your thoughts on Clementine?
Well, I think they're kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum. Like you said, Kellyanne is silent, watchful, kind of haunted. Clementine is loud, naive, and defensive of Chevalier. I think of they define the moral structure of the film, like belief without seeing versus belief because of seeing. Clementine has innocence sustained through denial. She hasn't seen the videos, so she creates this fantasy where Chevalier is this innocent guy who's been framed. Because she says, like we were saying about how anyone can hack into things, she says he's been hacked and all this evidence has been
manipulated the
him.
videos. It's like she hasn't seen the videos, but she's like, they've been faked.
Yeah,
I'm like, you haven't actually seen them, but she's convinced.
She's convinced herself, and then she meets. Kellyanne and Clementine kind of meet on the street because they camp out to be first in line to get in to watch the trial. So they meet they've got this similar, they're both there for the same reasons, well, to see the trial, but from completely different viewpoints. And then Clementine is so kind of naive and out of her depth that Kellyanne is so trained and reserved and kind of world weary that she sort of takes her under her wing in a weird way, which I find is another reason why her motivations aren't quite clear, because she kind of seems to take pity or sees something in her that's worth protecting almost, that she takes her back to her flat and feeds her and gives her, a bit of comfort, I suppose, and
tries to take her to go squash and ends up buying her a racket.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know what she's trying to bring her into her world or give her something to hold on to. And I mean, when she runs into her again the second time, she even just goes, "Oh God, this one again," sort of thing. And then she kind of, and then she's like, "Oh well, I'll see you later." And then she's like, "Oh look, what are you doing?" Like she could have let her just walk away and she would have been out of her life. She's like, "No, come back," So it's almost like it feels like she wants to protect her, which again muddies her motivation for the whole thing in a weird way, but I guess shows, because at the end she gives the video to the family. I guess it does show that she has some kind of moral core to her, even though she is like destroying her life because of her addiction, obviously, to these highs that she's getting from these situations. But she does have this protective nature over Clementine in a way. But then she lets slip that she's seen the videos, and Clementine has to see the videos, right?
Because it almost made me think, like, is she almost trying to persuade Clementine away from how she feels about Chevalier?
Yeah.
But the whole thing is, like, when Clementine calls into the TV panel show, she starts ranting about, he couldn't have done it, he's innocent, he's being framed, and everyone's to start making jokes, and she gets really kind of upset and a bit hurt by it all. And then there's also one woman who says, please message me. And it's this whole thing of, like, when someone, really believes something and you go, no, you're wrong, or that you just double down. And whereas it almost seems like, I don't know, like, it's Kellyanne just like, I'm going to, I don't know, show you, like literally show you.
But I think it's like, she, like I was saying, it's like belief without or belief because of. Like, I think at the end of the day, she's like, look, you can't go on like this. You need to watch the videos. And then if you still believe that, then great. But you need to, at this point, you need to see them. But then when she shows her, and like we only hear it, and it's horrific. And then you see the end, but you see the end bit where you see his eyes, and then she sees, and she's like, it can't be anyone else but him. And then she just goes, okay, now the next one. And she's like, no, stop. And it's like, okay, so it's almost like, you wanted to see these, so we're going to watch them. And it's like Clementine's innocence is destroyed in that moment,
but for good ends, almost.
Because then she leaves because she's like, I've made a mistake. But also it marks the beginning of Kellyanne's sort of, I guess, descent, or her like rapid.
Because she's got no one now to kind of tether her to.
Because when they're eating the pizza and they're talking about the AI, and you hear, and then she's like, can it tell jokes? So they get it to tell jokes to kind of break the ice of the situation. And then later on, when Kellyanne's like kind of basically bidding on this video, she's asking the AI to just tell her all these bad jokes. So she's trying to cling onto that, what she had with Clementine, that kind of moral center, or that piece of humanity, while she's
just human connection
while she's in the depths of the dark web trying to find this video and bid on this video. So I think it does show hints that she does have some kind of moral core, which is shown at the end when she gives them the video, but only after she's taken those weird selfies, which again complicates her even further.
Yeah, but then you've got the other kind of main female character, or main character in the film, which is Francine, the mother of Camille, and so you have her there. So she's this constant reminder of the loss of, like, the actual loss of this child, the mother's like pain, and how she shows up there every day, and you can tell how much it is affecting her, and the fact that when they do show the courtroom videos, she decides to stay. And the thing is, the video is not of her daughter, but obviously, and I think she bursts out of the room not long after the video starts, and it's this whole thing of, because she mustn't have been able to take it because she hasn't got the video of her daughter. So all she must be thinking is of her daughter and what that could have been. And her imagination is probably even going to the even worse possible places. And I think she does say in one of the interviews that she just wants to know what happened to her daughter.
Yeah, to know is better than to not know. But then you've got to watch the video.
So Kellyanne is, in some senses, kind of trying to give her the closure.
But but only after she got what she wanted out of it. Because it's almost like she has to complete the set. She can't go on. She can't watch 2 out of 3 videos. She has to watch all 3. She has to see them all. Like, that's her end game. And then
so is her motivation just to see the final video, or is her motivation to give Francine that closure? Maybe it's both.
Well, it's the transaction, right?
Yes,
like, she gets what she wants out of it, and then she gives them the video. It's like, because it's like, well, justice should still be done. And or maybe it's because it did actually, it finally proved that it was Chevalier, and that's what she needed to see. But there's also this obsession with Camille and wanting to kind of become her and create this this thing. Like, I don't know what she's going to do with those videos. Is she going to then auction those off on the dark web, or are they just for herself? But it's almost like redressing the balance. And I think that's what it was about. Like with Camille's video being missing, everything's out of balance. And it's like it's kind of like, and again, that goes to my theory about her wanting to conjure Camille and bring her back to life in a way in the absence of this video and create this kind of thing. But then, but then she does get the video and she does those weird selfies, and it's almost like this is her transaction of like, this is what I want out of this situation, and now that that's done, here you can have the video.
But then having that focus on Francine is the counterpoint to Kellyanne and Clementine. Like this whole thing of like, you know, especially groupies who show up to these, or just anyone who goes to these courtrooms just for almost entertainment, are completely forgetting that, this child has a mother who has lost her child and has to sit through and has to see all those people just there enjoying it. Like she says, I see you and you are obscene. And there's the scene, I mean, it is the most amazing scene in the film, that scene where she shows up dressed as Camille.
And the music is incredible.
And then just that scream as she looks up, when she finally puts the braces in. But the thing is that kind of also leading up to that point, you keep going to Francine, and it's this longer shot, quite distant from Francine, and you just see her constantly kind of looking over. And so she sees Kellyanne, and she's like, she sees what she's doing and how she's dressed. And then when Kellyanne puts the braces in, I think she looks straight into the camera. But it's a whole thing of like, you're constantly seeing Francine. So I think this is the whole thing of like, there is all this often discussion about this idea of hybristophilia and what is it that motivates these women. But then I think it's really important that you have the mother character. That you're also seeing that, what if you don't have that you have to go to this trial because it's your fucking child, and having to hear all this. And this whole thing of like, some people finding it does confront you with, how can you find this entertaining when there's such real pain at the center of it all.
I think that's what Pascal Plante is doing, is kind of saying, going, what Kellyanne's doing, this isn't normal behaviour. Like, there is, and again, it's like, and there's this idea of this. There's almost this fetishization of all of these elements of the true crime stuff, right? And it's like, and it is that reminding you that no, but these are real. For the purposes in the universe of this film, these are real people. These are victims. These. And actual, these killings were horrendous and they took place, and these girls need to be represented in some way as real people, and that's what Francine accomplishes. Because it's the film wants to implicate us in all of this stuff and then remind us, and it's not finger wagging like we said, like it's not that, but it's in a more subtle way of like, these were people, these were girls that lost their lives, and so that's the counterpoint to everything that we're watching Kellyanne do, because Kellyanne's our protagonist. So you could almost get lost in her world, but we get that counterpoint of the mother and of her reactions to everything that she's doing, and the news reports and things like that, which I think is a really smart move to, again, it's about balance. It's keeping that balance.
And so then it's also this choice that's been made about not representing the violence, of not showing the violent acts, but we hear them described. So we get the graphic details in words, and then we also hear some of the videos as well. Again, this interview with Plante, he says, I keep saying I try not to be sadistic. I try to walk the rightful path with this film. But then he was saying when he was having to record the sound with young girls, and he said at first it was really like he was feeling really bad and didn't want to put through the girls through it. But then he also says, I started to get a bit sadistic myself, like, let's put the drill louder. I wanted this thing to be so potent that I even sometimes had to sit back, relax, breathe out and be like, I don't need to be that intense. Why are we bloodthirsty while we're creating that kind of stuff? It's so easy to get carried away. So I think it also relates to the direction of the film. I think Pascal Plante does an amazing job with the direction of the film. I mentioned before the camera movements, especially in that first scene. It's all this floating camera. There's also kind of, I think, a lot of long lenses that it often does seem like you're far away from the characters observing them. So again, it's this whole thing of putting us in the place of, kind of voyeur. But then we have the scenes when they're watching the videos and, it's interesting. The film's called Red Rooms and there's hardly any red in the film at all. It's all very kind of cold and wintry, or maybe more autumnal. There's all this kind of blue light throughout the film. Although I noticed towards the end when she goes and takes the hard drive to Francine, as she's going outside, you see through the windows and the leaves are all very red. But there's these few, and the only few times that you really see red in the film is when she's watching the videos and there's all this red light on the face. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to put. Yeah,
there's the contrast because the courtroom is this stark white. So there's like muted palettes, but there's these stark whites and deep blacks and cold, these kind of cold control observational camera movements. I mean, the big long take in the courtroom, and also when it turns around, you see, I think it's the defense attorney, and even amongst the crowd of people watching, Kellyanne is like this spectre. You can, like, amongst all the people watching, she's the one you only really can see. She kind of floating there in the background, like just watching everything going on. And
there's also like a lot of glass, you have Chevalier, he's in this clear glass box, but then also you have a lot of Kellyanne's apartment. She lives in this high-rise building, and you see it, and it is
she
all
lives
this
in a glass box as well.
Yes, yeah. And there's always these shots of her, like the city behind her and the lights, and you're seeing her through a lot of glass partitions as well. So there's definitely kind of interesting visual motifs. And definitely, the whiteness of the courtroom. And I think there's another scene where she's at a modelling shoot and she's all mostly in white against a white background. A lot of her photo shoots are against this white background. So it's definitely like stylistically doing some really interesting things as well.
There's that great photo shoot she does when I think Clementine comes to see the shoot, but it's like the really dark, disturbing one. And she's even got this like bejeweled balaclava on, which suggests Chevalier's balaclava from the videos, which I made a note saying like it kind of feels that's an element of like this case is already entering the popular culture in a way that like they want to have these kind of
images,
these Chevalier influenced images to be like, because she's known as this hard-edged, like edgy model that does these like controversial photo shoots. So like she's with this agency or this advertising campaign where they want to be edgy and they want to be relevant.
Yeah, they say that's your brand.
Yeah. So this edgy, relevant marketing campaign has her in this like bejeweled balaclava to kind of reference the case, which I think is like just another thing about how all of this kind of commodified violence kind of enters popular culture. I think that's, I just thought, that's an interesting little like note that's not immediately apparent.
And they said that towards the end when the modelling agency fires her, they're like, oh yeah, that's your brand is edgy, but this is too far. And I'm like, well, so doing a photo shoot,
exactly.
That's enough.
Yeah.
But then her actually going,
I mean, it's kind of like, what she was doing was pretty crazy, but it's kind of that idea of like, you hire the, like, so like when James Gunn was like, all his tweets from 20 years previously came out and they're like, well, we wanted edgy, but not that edgy, you're fired sort of thing. And it's like, it's like how much edge, again, it's about boundaries, like how much edge you're willing to go.
The culture is using these images, but then it's your fault.
Yeah.
But there's these other references, images throughout the film to Arthurian legend. So we have the AI that Kellyanne has customized, which she calls Guinevere. And you also see that when she's on the dark web or the deep web or whatever, and she's bidding on the video, that her username is the Lady of Shalott. So just for those of you who don't know, so the Lady of Shalott, there's this poem written by Alfred Tennyson, was written in 1832 and then revised in 1842. And so you have the Lady of Shalott who lives in a castle, kind of an island castle in a river, which flows by, and the river flows by Camelot. But the Lady of Shalott is not so much imprisoned. She kind of is imprisoned in this castle. She suffers from this mysterious curse, which means that she can't leave. And so she continuously, all she does all day is weave images on a loom. But she's never actually allowed to look out directly at the world outside. She has a mirror set up that gives her a reflection of what is outside. And so she looks in the mirror and is often weaving images that she sees in the mirror. So she's looking out at the people of Camelot. Then one day she is looking in the mirror and she sees Lancelot the knight. And she stops weaving, and just this glimpse of Lancelot inspires her to look out directly out the window and then also leave the tower. So that kind of, by leaving the tower, that brings the curse upon her. She finds a boat and she writes her name on it and she floats down the river to Camelot, but she dies before arriving at the palace. And so all these people gather around her corpse, around her dead body. And one of the people that looks at her is Lancelot, who I think remarks upon how lovely she is. So it's interesting, this whole idea of this woman who's kind of isolated in this tower, and you have Kellyanne, who lives in this high-rise tower almost. She seems very isolated and detached from the world around her. This idea of looking, so she's the bearer of the look, but she's disconnected from the people that she's looking at. This idea of seeing the knight, Lancelot, and Chevalier is, I think, a French term.
Knight.
It's French for knight. You have this whole idea that she leaves the tower and then ends up dying, and this whole idea that everyone kind of gathers around her dead body and looks at her and they remark on how lovely she is, this kind of idea. So it's interesting, that idea that she driven to leave her castle because she desires Lancelot, but then she dies before she's able to do anything about her desires. So there's been a lot written about that she's trying to escape. Maybe that's a form of empowerment, but then she dies before she's kind of tarnished in any way. She has to keep her innocence. And yeah, it's interesting that, maybe the mirror is now the dark web, that it is this reflection of the world, this very dark reflection, this idea that she weaves a tapestry, this idea of like the whole scene where she goes online and she goes through and she manages to find Francine's, get into her email. It's this whole thing of like, you're kind of scouring forums and you look at different footage and you go from here and you search here and you go from there to there. It's kind of this weaving, this tapestry. This online threads all together. But then it's like interesting use of this imagery. But I guess it's this whole reason of what does it add to it, or what did you make of all this Arthurian legend stuff?
I just think it adds more layers to the enigma that this film is. I think it's obviously drawing parallels with Kellyanne's character. I think she's weaving a tapestry of her own, like, because obviously she's got this is all means to an end for her. Of, I guess, if the director is to be listened to of his own work, about this. She's just searching for this new high, this new thing that it's not just observing the court case isn't enough. She has to be involved in the story somehow. Like, she's creating her involvement in the story, like implanting herself in there. And again, I think that goes, like, if she's weaving on a loom, like, this even goes to my idea that she's trying to recreate Camille in some way. I think if you think about like Kellyanne, Clementine, Camille, these names all sound very similar to each other. So I think there's this aspect of that. But yeah, I think it's just adding just extra layers of interpretation onto this film that we can just keep, again, we can go down our own rabbit hole trying to unpick it and find sort of the core truth of this film. I think it's everything and none of it all at once.
And speaking of going down the rabbit hole, I believe you have some thoughts on how we can link our two films today.
Yes.
So I'm going to let you cook.
Okay. Yeah.
Do it.
I'm in the kitchen. So yeah, I was just thinking about like the way the Matrix and Red Rooms actually might be sort of mirror images of each other in a way. So when you put them side by side, they might seem completely different, but they're actually doing a lot of the same philosophical work. Both films are asking a question about what if access to truth doesn't set you free? What if it actually destabilizes you? What if the systems that we live inside aren't designed to help us understand the world, but to actually consume us? In the Matrix, reality is a simulation, one that keeps humans' minds calm while their bodies are used as fuel. In Red Rooms, there's no fake reality, but there is a kind of distance created by technology, that violence exists as data, and that in both films, the system relies on mediation. The further removed you are from reality, the easier you are to control. And this is why I think Neo and Kellyanne are kind of opposites to each other. This is where my theory about Kellyanne being a digital avatar in the human world, because Neo is a human avatar in the digital world. He's flesh and blood. His identity is shaped inside the code, while Kellyanne, on the other hand, is she's emotionally hyper-controlled, completely shaped by screens and data and access. Neo's trying to wake up from the digital world into the real. Kellyanne seems to be doing the reverse, bringing the logic of the digital world into the physical world. And they're both fluent in the systems that trap them. They know how to move through the worlds, but they don't belong in either. When they've crossed the line, when they've seen too much, there's no way back. The Red Pill and the Matrix and the unseen videos in Red Rooms do the same thing. They turn knowledge into a burden. Once you've seen the truth, innocence is gone. The Red Pill isn't about gaining superpowers. It's about accepting something traumatic. In Red Rooms, the act of looking is loaded with moral weight. Clementine can defend Chevalier because she hasn't seen it. Kellyanne believes because she has. So the videos are like the Red Pill. It's like they become the border, the doorway with which you walk through in order to change, that changes your life one way or the other. And then in the end, like neither film offers a clean resolution. Neo doesn't destroy the Matrix. He just buys humanity more time. Kellyanne doesn't really save anyone. She just makes the truth impossible to ignore. They're not, the protagonists aren't solutions. They're kind of symptoms of the problem. They exist because the systems exist. And if you could look at it a way that awakening doesn't bring freedom. Neo wakes up naked, terrified, and discarded like waste. Kellyanne wakes up to the full truth and responds with paranoia and self-erasure. The suggestion that really the world as it is doesn't necessarily liberate you. Sometimes it just shows you that you're just trapped.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of similarities there. And also but then there are also opposites, because Matrix, it relies on the spectacle, whereas Red Rooms relies on denying you all of this stuff. And I just think they're actually quite interesting to put side by side.
I mean, yeah, there's this whole thing of like this idea of going down the rabbit hole. As the one is that taking you across all these different planes of reality, and then the other one is all about morality and how far that can be, how that can be pushed. And so I guess at the ending of the film, I do wonder, is Kellyanne ultimately a hero? Does what she do at the end exonerate all the weird, dodgy things that she does? Or did she have good intentions all along? Because the whole thing of like her going out there and finding the video, because the thing is, the video obviously existed. It was going to be put out there for someone to buy. And so I guess the whole thing is that because she buys it and then she gives it to Francine and it goes to the authorities, it helps actually, it makes Chevalier plead guilty, and so so in some ways justice is served by her going through all of that. But then it's the whole thing of like the selfie on the bed, dressing up in the school uniform. So I think maybe what you're saying before, it being all transactional, that she can't get beyond the transactional. And you also said the whole thing of like that being subject to the systems is like, because
the system still exists, right? All those people in the auction, the people who are selling the video, they're the ones that are actually they're the distributors. If we're saying that Chevalier is doing it just to make video, just for the money, that he's not actually, that it's like there's this whole system in place for these videos that Chevalier's gone to prison, but the system still exists.
People are still looking for content.
Yeah, and so there'll be another Chevalier probably at some point. And again, and that's the thing where, and like Kellyanne takes those photos, it's like, is she going to sell those on the dark web for sickos as well? Like, but she does give them the video, so like there is some closure, but the technology is still there. It's still going to be used for whatever people want to use it for. The system with all the people who are bidding on the video and the people selling the video, like they're not being brought to justice. So it's kind of Yeah, it's like in the Matrix, like the Neo sacrifices himself, but the Matrix is still there, the AI is still there, humans are still struggling. It's like the system's still there. Like it's a small win in an ongoing battle, I guess.
Yeah. God.
Yeah. Fun. Merry Christmas.
This is the world we're living in. Yay.
Merry Christmas.
Yay. All right. So should we end with some honourable mentions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go through this pretty quickly. So what's your first honourable mention?
I've got no movies for me. I've got 2 TV shows and a podcast. I've always got to do an X-Files, well, as much as I can. And it's not really like AI technofear, but I was thinking like down the rabbit hole, it's anything similar. There's a great episode of the X-Files called Field Trip, which Mulder and Scully end up being caught and digested by a giant fungus. But what it does is it feeds you hallucinogens so you feel like you're actually still alive, and it feeds you what you want to believe in to make your seeming reality more acceptable, so you don't think about it too hard and it can just digest you. So it's basically doing the Matrix, but it's a mushroom, not a machine. And the whole thing is that there's this whole thing about Mulder saying like, I believe in aliens, and Scully saying, oh, they're bullshit. And it becomes this whole, and she's like, and she always gives the quote unquote rational answer. So when they're being consumed, the world starts to change to reinforce their belief systems. So because that's what it thinks that you need in order to just believe that your life is still going on while you're slowly digested. So I thought that kind of was doing the Matrix kind of in a different way, but it's also bringing into focus like what are the realities that we're willing to believe. We all have our points of view and our own versions of reality. So like Clementine's version of reality is that Chevalier was being set up, and and it's like, how do we get convinced otherwise? How do we break those cycles of belief and self-denial, I guess? And so that by using a fungus that eats people, the X-Files is exploring that sort of terrain. It's a great episode.
Yeah. The honourable mention I have is Demon Lover, the film by Olivier Assayas. So this comes out 2002, and it follows a executive played by Connie Nielsen who's part of this company who's trying to acquire the rights to a Japanese anime studio that specializes in like hentai, almost like animated pornography, essentially. And it's all about the kind of corporate intrigue and double dealings that are going on. Definitely about the kind of globalization of all these companies across the world basically being in control. Also about our kind of relationship with the online world and desensitization to violence, the push to creating this ever extreme pornographic material online, because that's where the big money is, especially at the beginnings of the internet. And then as it goes along, there's all these double crossings and blackmail amongst all the people. So it's not set in like a fantastical future. It's more like a kind of tech thriller. But then there is, towards the end, there is this, I think it's called like the Hellfire Club. It seems pretty much like a kind of Red Room type of situation is happening online, and the characters are kind of getting drawn closer to this internet site that is showing kind of torture and murder of people. It's not a well-known film, and it's got a great soundtrack by Sonic Youth.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And I think, Olivier Assayas is such an interesting filmmaker. He kind of, some of his films do kind of flirt with genre in some really interesting ways. He made this, and he also made the film Boarding Gate, starring Asia Argento, around this time, that seemed to be about these kind of corporate tech thrillers. And also he made the film Personal Shopper, which is this kind of a ghost story. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely a great film that people should check out.
Brilliant. Yeah, I really want to see that. So my other TV episode is X-Files adjacent. It's also created by Chris Carter, and that's Millennium, the film, the show starring Lance Henriksen about a profiler who can see into the minds of serial killers. But it also has this kind of end of the world, end times kind of vibe to it as well. But there's a great episode in season 2 called The Mikado, which is about, it basically opens with a bunch of kids trying to look up porn on the internet, and it's the 90s, so it's all really very 90s looking, and they find a link that says, they can watch this live stream of a sex video, and they click on it, and they open up, and it's this woman, a woman in her underwear tied to a chair, and then and it's all, because it's dial-up internet, it's all really jagged video, like kind of very frame by frame, and suddenly this man in a cloak comes up behind her and like slits her throat, but only when there's a number on the side behind her. And then when the people viewing the video gets to that number, then he kills her. So the Millennium Group and Lance Henriksen's character have to go after this guy. And of course, a new video pops up with a countdown with how many views he needs before the victim gets killed. And they discuss that it might be the return of a serial killer called Avatar, which, funnily enough, I was talking about avatars. And it's absolutely the Zodiac Killer. Like what they talk about being Avatar, it's the Zodiac Killer, like almost beat for beat, with his weird codes and symbols, and even the cloak he wears in the live videos is like the black hood and with the symbol on it and stuff. But it's this investigation of like the internet, but it's all 90s dial-up internet, and there's a bit where like they have to like Frank Black has to watch everything through screens because they have to go on a remote investigation, and he can't connect to the killer's mind because it's all through the screens. And it's all dial-up internet, and it's like it's very much like, oh, look at this internet thing is scary business from the 90s perspective. It's very interesting.
My second choice is the film Cam that came out around 2018, 2019. It's directed by Daniel Goldhaber, but it's written by Issa Mazzi. I'm not sure I'm saying her name correctly. I'm sorry. And Issa was actually a cam girl, and so a lot of her experiences fed into the screenplay. So it's about a young woman who works as a cam girl. So she performs online, and men send in requests for things for her to do on camera, and she gets paid for doing that. And she's quite successful at doing this. And then one day she finds that she's locked out of her account, so she's unable to go online and perform and make money. And part of the reason why she's been locked out is because there actually seems to be someone else or something else that looks exactly like her that is using her account and performing online. And so it's all about her trying to, figuring out who has taken her identity. And so it is all about this idea about online identities, but also very much about labor, about specifically women's labor in areas of sex work, like being a cam girl. But it also does this alongside being a great horror thriller as well. So I think it's on Netflix.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's a Netflix film. So it's a really good film. So it's called Cam from 2018.
Brilliant.
All right. I think we can leave it there.
Okay.
So we've come to the end of our AI and technofear season, and we're looking ahead, and then we'll get into our director double bills.
Brilliant. You can find us on social media. You can send us a message through Instagram, or you can email us at
sci-frightspodcast@gmail.com.
At sci-frightspodcast@gmail.com. If you want to drop us a line, you want to mention anything that we've been talking about, check our references, give us some advice on some other films. We can do some reader mail if you want to get in touch.
Don't send us any links to videos online.
No, please don't. And keep an eye out in 2026 and an ear out for some new episodes.
Please rate and review us.
Rate and review, please. You can leave comments on Spotify and whatever.
Please tell people about the podcast.
And tell all your friends.
All right. So that's it. See ya.
Bye-bye.